workshop. I think this is the first workshop for many of our this is the first workshop for the new council members. So just kind of give a quick overview real quick. This is a chance to see it's very informal. I'm going to be eating during the meeting. That's how informal it is, okay? There's snacks. If you need to get a drink or something, by all means, feel free to do that. We do have our workshop policies actually on here, but our policies, we do not let the public does not speak at these. This is just for council members to talk and kind of go over a lot of things that are going to come up as future issues. So just give and take. It's again, no action can be taken. I think we all know that. But so tonight we're going to talk about the master development plan. We're going to we're going to look at different engineers and look at street repairs and look at agreement to use the rec facility and some of our policies. And like I said, this is just an informal time that we do. It is being taped. It is being broadcast live. So just so you know. But with that, we will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to begin with community development. And I guess the proposal on the master development plan. Is that you? That's Mr. Jerry, huh? Come on up.
What do you think, I should just sit here?
Yes. Come and join us.
Yep. I think we're gonna tag team this.
I can give a little history if you like.
Yeah, please.
So last year, the council was concerned, and as were us as staff, about what's our development plan. We've got this land, how are we going to develop it? We've got land that we own, that we sell, and Marlon and I's concern were, so far our development has been good, but we didn't want to make a misstep on allowing something in a certain location that probably wasn't best for that location. And so we needed some help with that, and so council hired Law Kingdon, who also works with PEC, to kind of put together this Progress for Principles. It's basically a community master plan for growth. So as you read through that, it really talked about some of our history, the land that we own, and there was a couple options in there for growth, whether we wanted to focus around housing or business, and of course there was a combined growth, which is probably the best way. So there were some public meetings held. Last year the city put out a survey that had questions about development in there, and so all that information was included in this plan. And then at the end of the year, Marlon works very well in the industrial side of things, and we knew we needed someone that was more on the commercial side. So Jerry had just left Slosson's and came on, created his own company, and was willing to work with us on a contract basis to help us finish this and then actually start marketing. Both Marlon and Jerry kind of marketing of this is what our plan is for growth and trying to gain interest from commercial, retail, and housing development. So we're at the point where I think we've got it pretty much finalized. The idea was to get any additional thoughts or comments from council and then bring it to you for your final approval. And this would be the document and the map that we would use as we start marketing and really developing the city. So I turn that over to Jerry first.
Great. Well, thank you. As Ty said, I came into this process really at the tail end of it, but had an opportunity to spend some time with Jeff Best and Scott with Law Kingdon, or LK, I guess I go by now, and Scott Donachie with Professional Engineering Consultants, who were really the authors of this and did all the analysis. I think they did really a fine job, and I think they had a lot of good input from the staff and Marlon, the council, and the community. So we didn't think, I think you all got a copy of this, and I at some point in time when you got some spare time, there's a lot of good information in here. I think it's a good snapshot of where Bel Aire is today and the trend line. And at the end of it, there are some strategies and guidelines that I think will be useful in evaluating future development. But what Marlon and I thought we would do is just touch on the highlights of this, and so kind of go through an executive summary, I guess, if you will, and then leave plenty of time for you all to ask questions. One of the interesting parts of this, I thought, was the demographic analysis. And a lot of this is intuitive. You all live here, so you've seen it, you live it every day, but the forecast is that the trend line on growth is expected to continue. I think there are a lot of sound reasons in there for that. Over the last 7-8 years, Bel Aire has been one of the fastest growing communities in South Central Kansas, and Mays, which has a smaller base, is growing a little bit faster, but Bel Aire is growing faster than all of the other suburban communities in this area. They projected growth out to 2035 at a population of about 10,500 roughly. That's slowing down the growth rate from 2.4, which is where it's at now, down to about 1.7. And so we'll see, but at that rate, as you'll see, be pretty well built out by 2035 with the land within the current city limits. I thought some of the interesting observations on housing, Bel Aire housing today is in high demand, both on the occupied side and the rental units. The analysis showed that the rental side of things is underserved, and that there is some growth potential for apartments relative to other communities similar to Bel Aire. The rents that people do pay in Bel Aire are higher than most in the region. I think a lot of that may be because the rental units there are, a lot of them are houses versus apartments, which obviously they get a higher rent. Homes in Bel Aire tend to retain value better than most regional communities, and I think some of that has to do with the stability of the community, but I'm not sure. But it's a good factor to have. And then homes built in the last few years will likely increase Bel Aire's median home value. So the new homes that are being built are pulling up that median home value a little bit, which is obviously good for your tax base, and again, creating a stable community. Development construction trends. The statement here, again, I think this is kind of self-evident, but Bel Aire has transitioned from a rural community to a suburban community. I don't think anybody thinks of Bel Aire now as a rural community. Residential development has rebounded from the Great Recession, and I think in some ways my observation is perhaps better than a lot of the areas in South Central Kansas. You've got a pretty robust housing development right now, but it was delayed. That, as we all know, this part of the country did not rebound from the recession as quickly as others. So it's I think there's healthy growth going on right now. This third point here I thought was pretty interesting. Bel Aire's land use mix is imbalanced relative to many comparable suburban communities. And PEC did a survey of similar communities, and I thought they were pretty selective about how they were all Midwestern communities, they were all suburban communities, they were all communities that were near some type of a college or university. So they really were pretty selective, and I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but I think one of them might have been in Minnesota, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, so they were Midwestern. But the real imbalance was on the institutional land use and the commercial land use. And I think if you look at the map, it's pretty easy to understand why that is. Of Bel Aire's developed areas, the institutional land use is about 14%. Norm for that might be closer to 8 or 9%. And if you look at it, and what really drives that are the schools, the large land area that's devoted to the schools that have been built in Bel Aire recently, which is a good thing. I think that's creating capacity for your community. And then also the Catholic Care Center obviously is a large, massive land with that institutional use. As more of the community, don't really anticipate a lot of new institutional, so as more of the community develops, that percentage will come more in line with what you normally see for a community of this size. The other is the commercial. The existing land use for commercial right now is about 2%. The norm might be something closer to 8%. And I think really what's driving that right now is that a lot of the demand for retail and commercial services in Bel Aire is being served outside of the city limits right now, primarily along Woodlawn and Rock and 37th and 29th Street and 21st, obviously, just on the south edge of the community. So I think as we move into talking about future land use development, that is an area that we'll start to see that, I think, evolving now here in the coming years. I think we're at a pivot point on that. Future land use development, there are a couple pie charts on the next page at the top, and the one on the left shows existing land use mix, and the one on the right is the preferred growth land use mix at build out. So the big thing you'll notice on that is on the left side, there's a large piece of the pie on the left side, 30% that's undeveloped, and then 20%, 21% the agricultural. So in this build-out scenario, that's gone, and so then you'll see the pie chart for those different land uses. And there were four, I thought, key observations that were made in this document. An additional 63 acres of parks, recreation, and open space is called for and is reflected in this land use matrix. The idea there is that all new residents would have a public park within a 10 to 15 minute walk, which boils down to basically some type of park within every quarter section. So if you look at the map on the next page, there are 3 quarter sections there that have the green cross hatching on them. So those are quarter sections where you might see that those parks or recreational uses. For the most part, the rest of the community is pretty well served with parks and open space.
Now, is the thought that entire area would be a park, or
No.
there would be a park
Good
in
question.
that area?
There would be a park
Okay.
in that area somewhere. And a lot of communities these days, those parks are done in conjunction with residential neighborhood development, and so I think that would be something you could anticipate. Future residential uses account for 925 acres, and that's split a little over half of that with a suburban kind of a single-family type housing, similar to what you see in a lot of Bel Aire now. But the other almost half is medium and multifamily density, and this calls for 70 acres of multifamily. And then on the commercial side, and again, this was an area where there's probably the most growth potential is on the commercial side. Nearly 400 acres are identified that would be split between, almost equally, between a mixed-use local commercial and a general commercial. And the local commercial would be more of the service retail, small offices and that type, whereas the general commercial is more of the larger scale, more intense kind of. And we can talk about that a little more about where that might go and what the drivers are there. But I wanted Marlon to discuss the industrial because that's certainly he's the expert in this region for that, and I think can also speak to how that fits in with an economic development program for your community.
Your community has developed in a wonderful way where you can live, work, play, and shop. And one of the things that is extraordinarily unusual is to have a place where you can live, play, and shop, but has 880 acres where you can work. And for a community this size, that's extremely unusual. And that's kind of how we got started, isn't it, Ty? To talk about places to work, industrial park, business park, actually. What has happened here in the last 4 years, we have roughly 500,000 square feet of buildings now. And that's a good thing. Now, you're going to have some time here where you're going to have tax abatement for a while. When those burn off, you are really going to have a great deal of tax base that's going to contribute to the community's other opportunities. So I think that what we are out of balance too is, in a good way, is that we have places to work. And it's interesting, you know, the first business is always the hard one to get because it's a field, and nobody wants to be the first business outside in a field. The good thing was that we got the first one, and then the second one, and then we got a couple of really big ones. It was my privilege last week to tour Epic Sports. And we're going to have a ribbon cutting here soon, and that's worth looking at. I mean, that is an unbelievable facility, warehouse facility. Very high-tech, very computer-operated. They have 125 employees there. And they have tremendous growth potential and ambition. So I think we are, Jerry's hit the high points very well, but I think one thing I would point out is that the work part of it is an unusual opportunity for us. We continue to capitalize on it. And I'll say one more thing about it. It's not just an add to what's going on in Wichita. It is in some ways becoming a replacement to what's going on in Wichita. In that I mean, for example, if Wichita gets a call for 100 acres of land ready to build, they're forwarding that to us. And that's a great place to be in. And we actually have had some of those. So we have become the go-to place for opportunities to work, not just another place for an opportunity to work. And so we're promoting that, and I think we are wise to do so. And I think that in the long run, a very well-crafted, clean, quality industrial park serves the community very well. That's it.
And I think that I'll just piggyback onto that and say, because you do have the growth in the industrial and heavier commercial side that's creating jobs, I think that combined with the housing growth that we're seeing and are expecting to see over the coming years is going to create the demand for the commercial, more of the retail and service type of uses that I'm hearing from people that are desired, and Bel Aire wants its own commercial hubs and places to shop, and so I think the stage is being set for that. If you look at the plan there, the pinks and the reds are areas where we expect to see that commercial growth, And then there's a black cross-hatched area up on North Rock Road, just south of 254, that is identified as an area for potential large-scale mixed use and commercial, which makes sense because obviously that's a regional, 254 is a regional transportation highway, and so it would make sense. And it's also an area that can draw from a bigger area, not just Bel Aire. Whereas, for instance, the Central Park commercial might be more community-based. The commercial up on 254 might be more regional-based. So with that, we'd open it up to any questions or comments, but again, I think your consultants did a fine job with this. And
Gary, just a couple questions I've got. One is, as I was going through the survey said there was concern about us not getting too heavy in rental type of rent. Okay? I want to be careful about what I say about that survey because there are concerns that the survey can get back because they're pretty rigid in their questions and answers.
Right.
Okay? So you don't get that open-ended, what do you really think? kind of
Right,
thing,
right.
okay? So how can we position this so that we don't end up with an issue that's a big
Right.
concern to some of our residents?
I think that's a good point. And I think the first response to that is what this is, and it's really an evaluation of land uses that give you a balance. And as a community, certainly any apartment projects or rental projects will have to come through the zoning process and come before you. And I think that's where this is a guide. It's not a zoning ordinance. It's not approval. It provides a basis for you to make those decisions. So I think that's part of it. Is this really is just a base document to help you as you put in place your zoning codes and approve projects. The other thing I would say is that there are some qualitative aspects to this. As I mentioned, implementation strategies at the back of this, and I think that's very important. A lot of those grew out of my understanding out of that survey, and really if you read them all and take them in total, it's talking about raising the bar for the quality of development, and I think that as you go through the process as these areas, undeveloped areas, start to develop, you may choose to enact some new policies or ordinances that maybe you feel are reflective of people in the community. But so again, this is really, I guess I would call a policy guide. It's not even in itself a policy, but it's to help guide things. So if we hope that answered your question.
So if we finalize this and then there's a developer that wants to do something with some land that they purchased that doesn't exactly match what's in this plan, that's still something that the council and the zoning process can approve.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. And placement's a big key as well, and that's why this map, it helps us is, you get commercial along Webb, and it's gonna be tough to get single-family homes behind that. So sometimes, duplexes or apartments are a good buffer between your single-family to the commercial. And so that's kind of what this map kind of helps us determine that. But you're right, any kind of platting for whatever kind of development has to go through the planning commission. And then we usually do developers agreements where if council, the planning commission is concerned about screening, we can require a fence or trees or whatever to screen as well, so, yeah.
And there's been a number of projects where we have required miniature berms, miniature screening, and it works out. Another thing I do want to point out too, this has been in the plan for a long time, and appreciate all the years working with Marlon and getting to know Jerry again, and working with him this past year. It was interesting how when he talked to people about, it's one of the things I campaigned on, wanting to bring retailer, and I keep hearing that, well, we want to I'll go ahead and use, I know I shouldn't, but I'll go ahead and use names because I know these aren't happening. But I want a Cheesecake Factory, I want a Dave and Buster's, I want, okay, those things only go to major metropolitans. They won't even go to Wichita. You know, they look at all these, and that was one thing that was real educational when we went to that conference this past summer, was how there is that formula, rooftops, traffic counts, before, and if you do not hit that number, you're not even in the conversation. So do want to just remind everybody, you know, we're not going to have major right away, but starting off small, getting something, you know, because the Commerce Park is doing so well, and I applaud you for that as we start with this. I'm excited. I'm really excited now because that Commerce Park was a partnership that started just a very few years ago. I remember having that shovel out there when it was a field. There wasn't even, you know, it was a field. And I remember being out there for that first shovel. And now, as we turn the tides to look towards this retail, this is exciting. So just wanted to kind of remind everybody of that we'll get it going.
Especially with a lot of the land being city-owned, and you know, us having control of what comes in. What kind of policies do we have for, say, the aesthetics of a building? I mean, if you go to, you know, say Overland Park, there's a certain aesthetic aspect that buildings have to have. I mean, even the McDonald's there, you know, it's got stucco. It doesn't look like your McDonald's that's on Rock Road. I mean, what kind of policies do we have to ensure that the buildings that are built are going to match with the community?
Right. Well, again, there are, I think the way that's typically done, and the situation with Bel Aire is a little bit unusual because you do control so much land, and that gives you more control over the quality of the development, and Ty mentioned development agreements, and I think a lot of that gets negotiated, and because you're not only the city jurisdiction, but you're the seller, you've got actually a lot of control over that. And so in some jurisdictions, like Overland Park, for instance, have gone as far as having design review boards. And to my knowledge, I don't know that, I think Andover has a design review committee, but really this part of the country hasn't adopted that process. I think what you're seeing a lot of those design decisions and standards established in development agreements and PUDs, which is kind of a negotiated zoning. So if someone's coming in and taking a piece of agricultural land and wants to plan that and plat it and zone it, again, you know that you are in a position where you can impose standards on that.
I feel like it's important for the continued growth, especially you look at the home prices that are getting built in Bel Aire, is to maintain a standard and make sure that, you know, whoever builds is going to build to that standard. So, okay.
I know you guys came to talk about the master plan, but as we've talked before, when you know, we have a significant issue with the amount of land debt we have, and is there any opportunity you see in here that we can sell large parcels of these lands to a developer or an investor who would take that? I mean, you could put those agreements in those sales agreements as well, right?
It's been for sale for 15 years to developers.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, I hear things like, oh, this is one of the best industrial parks in the country.
Right.
So,
well,
what do we do?
It kind of goes back to what the mayor said earlier about users. So, I mean, you could transfer, someone that would come in and take a large tract of land. They're basically speculating. They're taking a big risk and assuming then some costs for holding that property, and so they're not going to want to pay much, if anything, for that land to take over that risk, and then you lose control of it. So I think that I think what's really interesting to me about this and the snapshot it's taken is I think the tide is turning for Bel Aire, and I think that you're going to have more users. And when I say users, I mean whether that's a store or a industry or a business or a housing development. they're not speculating. They're people that you can negotiate with and set some standards, and the value is going to be higher. They're going to be willing to pay more because they're going to have a rent payer, a tenant. They're going to be a tenant, and so I think that's the trade-off really in terms of trying to do it with businesses or industries that where you know who you're dealing with versus someone who takes down a whole bunch of it and then you've lost control and you're not going to get much value.
So you were intimately involved with Newmarket Square.
Right.
And I know that project, it's taken like 20, 25 years to get where it is today. And I remember when it first started, so, but was that not done by a developer who owned that property and went forward with that?
It was, and the analysis we made was that Northwest Wichita was vastly underserved in virtually any metric you'd look at. There were just a lot of rooftops built and there wasn't really much retail. And we knew, again to the mayor's point, we knew who those specific users or in that case retailers and restaurants that were in similar sized communities that weren't in that area. So we didn't feel like we were really sticking our necks out too far. There was a little, we timed the market right, and I think we were fairly smart in doing that, but we were also kind of lucky.
One of the things that I'll say to your point, having something like this, if you're a developer coming into the community and somebody shows you the back of a napkin and says, this is kind of what we want for Bel Aire, they show you this, that developer is going to be impressed with that. The fact that you've had this much forethought and this much, and you have quality people preparing these, it gives you the ability to compete well for that developer. We've had this conversation before. We want exactly what you said: developers who will take down a piece, who will self-regulate, who will self-impose those architectural controls, so it is a nice community. That's what you want. But what you don't want is speculators that come in just to tie up a piece of ground for the hope that they in turn can find a developer and make money on you. So that's why we've been very, very persistent that we find people that will actually build something or develop something, as opposed to people just want to buy land. And I think, I know it seems like a longer process, and it is, because the market takes time. It just takes time for the community to grow to where all these things that we want, the Cheesecake Factory is in demand. And I think we're doing all the right things. This is just a piece of the puzzle of doing the right thing, to get those right people in to buy the right property for the right purpose.
You mentioned that for commercial type use, we're served at 2% versus what normally would be at an 8% level. You talked about how in Newmarket the analysis showed that they were underserved from a retail perspective. What type of analysis do we have that shows whether we're over or underserved from a retail perspective?
This hasn't taken that next step, which should really be a market analysis of, for your retail supply and demand. I'd say right now you're probably pretty much in balance, being pretty well served by what's along your south boundary. And I think what I was trying to say earlier is that the trend line on this is that I think we're just now getting into the territory where we may see more demand for retail and services beyond what's existing, and certainly I think here over the next year or so we'll be able to monitor that and maybe even do a little bit of market analysis and see if we're hitting those metrics that the mayor mentioned, because every business has a different measure, but they all have a measure, and they can tell you exactly how many residents they want within a 3-mile radius and a 5-mile radius, and how many trips per day and what the demographic profile, income profile of their customer is. And so, again, I think that we're just kind of tipping, or a pivot point, I guess is the way I guess I would term it, to where we're going to start to see the demand maybe start to outstrip the supply.
In your opinion, what else does the city need to do or could do to really get the ball rolling even more? Is there anything in specific that we can, for commercial, businesses to come in, is there anything that we need to do?
It's a great question. I think that infrastructure is always critical, in being smart about it, and I think you have been, and I think the stage is being set to help with that. And one thing that was, I guess, kind of parallel to this was the work that LK did on the park for expanding the park into Central Park, which I think in itself could be almost an anchor. It's going to be challenging based on kind of what I was saying earlier. The demand's not quite there yet. We're getting there, but anchors don't need to be, you don't have to have a Dillon's or a Walmart to be an anchor. And I think that in this case, a park, an area where you could have large community events and attract people from outside of the community and really bring people together in one area could help set the stage for that. And then the other thing I would just say is again, because you do control the land, you're in a position where if you've had somebody with the right project and the right types of uses, and to Marlon's point was a developer that was really going to get in there and build something, you have the ability to structure a deal in a way that would incentivize them to do what you want them to do. Again, so you've got a little more control over that than you would if it was, not privately held land. So go ahead.
One comment I was going to make to your question is, in time, and hopefully not too much time, some real serious consideration needs to be given to improvement of the access to 254. If you develop a really safe, controlled access to 254, I mean, I've worked with commercial retailers, and they're saying if we ever come, we're going to come to 254. And right now, 254 is just not quite ready.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that's how I come here most often, is off of 254 and come south on Rock Road, and I think that is really, I agree with Marlon. I think that would be deserving of being made a priority, because there's and you all probably travel it every bit as much, or if not more than I do, and you can tell. I haven't seen the trend line on the traffic counts, but you can tell it's going up. There's just more and more traffic on that road, and it's high-speed traffic, and Rock Road really doesn't even have a decel lane right now.
Not really.
So, I'm glad you made that point, Marlon.
More to that, is there more specific things you can think of that answers that question of improvement of access to 254 or the entrance into Bel Aire from 254? You mentioned a turn lane or a pull off. What else are we looking for in terms of steps to get there to?
Well, it's safety.
Yeah.
254 access is dangerous. You lost too many lives there, and I think that it's safety. We did it. There's a 254 study. Did we get that updated?
That was quite a while
It's been a while ago.
When was that done? Terry did that.
The county did a real recent one we can get from that.
And there was, as I recall, some of the comments in the study are that the truck traffic is starting to use 254 as a link going east. And of course, truck traffic and car traffic mixed together creates some real issues of safety. So I'm not an engineer to understand quite how to answer your question. But again, safety, convenience, identification off of 254 is important, will be important. Of course, utilities, we don't have those quite up there yet, but they're not too far. Could be done.
And we had mentioned maybe working on a market study.
Yep.
That might be able to help.
It would help. It would, and it wouldn't be that expensive to do it. And like I said, I think now's a good time to do that. So that might be something we look at over here this year.
So when you guys are talking with, potential buyers in the Commerce Park or Industrial Park area, and people choose not to select us, what are the typical reasons that they provide for not completing those deals or not moving forward with us?
Well, access has been one.
The 254 access?
Highway access.
Highway
Major
access.
highway access. I mean, we're kind of in between. We've got 254 on one end, we have K96 on the other end. But there's not any interchange right at the park, and I've heard that a number of times. And obviously it hasn't stopped it, and we have 500,000 square feet that we didn't have 4 years ago. So it's still okay. And what I think is particularly interesting, when somebody says that to me, I says, let's see, who's over there? FedEx.
Is that the main one?
Well, that's the main one that is based on a lot of traffic, truck traffic.
Okay.
But FedEx is a major name, so it
If it's
requires
good enough-
access.
If it's good enough for FedEx.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the point.
But that's the main reason that people are kind of walking away from those deals with us.
I would say, to answer your question, what's the major objection? That's probably one of the top objections. We don't have, there are some others, typically in locating an industry, you want to have services. Goes back to the commercial comment. You want to have lodging. Goes back to the fact that, we've got a little ways to go to get to lodging. All of these things will come in time. And I point that out. I says, let me put you in a car, let's just drive. You look at your watch and see how far it takes you to get to a hotel. 2 minutes. And I try to defeat that argument that way, but still, there's not a hotel on the corner.
And I think part of it with the industry right now isn't even so much the locale as you're competing against other other markets, not even in the Wichita metro area, that and workforces. It gets into a whole other area, but I think that's one of our challenges right now as a metro area is just, our unemployment rate is low. So I know there are a lot of efforts right now to recruit talent to this whole area, and I think, again, I think Bel Aire is very well positioned to capture as we get, hopefully, an influx of people moving into this metro area, that Bel Aire would be a great place for young families or empty nesters or whoever's moving in to live. So,
Todd, I have a question for you. How accessible is this master plan to just any resident in Bel Aire? Like, is this something that's available on our website or?
Not yet. We've held some public meetings and things to put this together, but wanted to actually, because the other council had input, and obviously we have a new council, so I wanted this council to be comfortable with it before we put it out to the public that this is our plan, because I didn't want to get ahead of you guys. So that was the idea of our meeting tonight, was so you had input, and if you all are comfortable with it, then we could move it through the process, which the process would be going to the Planning Commission, getting their approval, and then coming to you all. And then at that point, we would get it out everywhere, because there's a lot of good information in here for marketing and such.
Yeah, that's something that's really important. Again, during the campaign season and talking to residents door to door, one of the things that just became really apparent right away, and I felt myself was in this position too, is I've been a Bel Aire resident for 9 years, and I really didn't have much thought of the industrial park, the current status of Bel Aire as a city and where we're growing. Every resident knows we have a debt challenge to overcome. But it was very rare to encounter somebody that either had a good understanding of exactly where we were, or frankly that was really motivated in terms of, hey, do we have a plan? What are we doing about that plan? And what are the metrics in place to get there? I think there's a little bit of fatigue, I guess I'd describe it, where a lot of residents are somewhat frustrated that, there's probably some kind of plan, but we don't know what it is. And so one thing I want to know is it possible, do we have anything in here that is an outlook, like maybe looks out 5 years and says, do we have some metrics, like some steps that we can achieve? I guess speaking in terms of goals, do we have some kind of short-term goals, and what would those look like, and how would we go about sharing that with the community so that we can say, hey, we've been in this position of, as a city in land development, it's not something we want to be in that place for forever. We want to get the land sold, and this is our big process that's taking place. But I think it's really important that we can, if we don't have it in here, to add something in terms of what are our goals, maybe on a yearly basis or a few years out, that type of thing. I don't know if that's something specific we can talk to tonight, but I'd like to make sure that that's at the forefront of our minds, that we do need to try to communicate how we doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could, this map is really just it's actually a growth map of how we foresee the city developing with all the empty land. So that's kind of a plan. The short-term goals would be, which is what we try to do, is we have certain areas within Bel Aire that have utilities to them. And so the development that we want, which is what we're working on, for example, Deer Run had been sitting over there empty, and they're starting to develop now. But they had utilities there for several years. And, our goal has been to start with the development where our utilities are at. So that's what our short term, and so we could easily pull out of here areas where we have utilities that would be our goals for future development in the next 5 years, that these are areas that we want to begin with, whether it be residential, commercial, those types of things. And then I think we need to do better about kind of sharing our story of what the successes we've had. Because there's a lot of different things that happen over the months that pop up, and I think we need to tell our story a little bit better about what's happening. And so that's what Tristan, who handles our community development, we've been talking about, is how we can get information out there that, and it may be something as simple as we've got 7 lots that were sold in Central Park. There's going to be new houses. But that's a win, I think, for the city.
Definitely. Yeah. That would be definitely great to get that kind of news out.
Yep.
But how are you going to get this news out? We've tried this before in the past. We put it on Twitter, we put it on Facebook, we put it on Channel 7, and people just don't watch it. They're doing other things or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
Just like if you go home tonight and ask how many people watched this meeting tonight. We got to find some way to get the information out to the public, and the only way I can think of, and I will preach it again, is put a flyer in the water bill. Everybody gets a water bill, whether they pay online or however they pay their bill. They still get a hard copy of that water bill, right?
So you can also opt out and go paperless too. And we do have a number of people who do that.
Yeah. but they still get a water bill.
In an email format then?
I'm not sure how they get it, but they still get one because I know several people that pay online.
Yeah, but even if you do that, we have a number of residents who have opted into the paperless, so they don't get it.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
Do they, Ty?
They get an email which has an attachment that
Yeah,
has their
and they can
bill.
open that attachment.
That's what I was saying. They don't get a hard copy, they get an email.
Yeah, but you could attach the attachment to the
flyer.
the flyer to that.
It is.
Yeah. But I think that's the only way you
She's
get
saying
the
you can attach
information.
the information onto that email as well.
I
Yeah.
see what you're saying, yeah. But I would also say that, that is one thing that I have been really proud of even the last couple of years. And yeah, it's not perfect and we still got a ways to go, but I mean, our social media numbers are increasing daily with our app and with the Twitter and the Facebook has been just amazing. And I like, Facebook now is showing out highlights after every meeting. So yeah, I don't
I
expect
think
a lot
the
of
improvements have been
Another
really
way to
good.
get it done would be to have town hall meetings. But when we were building these two schools up here, who showed up? Us old folks. There wasn't hardly anybody there that had children. And I think Ty attended them and the mayor attended. And the rest of us were all seniors that went to this meeting to fight for this school.
There's definitely a lot of different avenues to reach a lot of different people, and we'll just continue to push them, and if people don't hear it, I mean, besides knocking on every single person's door, and I don't know how we're gonna make people.
But the trick is, like you said, though, is to find multiple avenues to communicate and use all of them, because
Yep.
you really have to over-communicate.
And that's what we do with the email, with the newsletter, with the newspaper, with the water bill, hard copy and electronic copy, and the social media. So we'll just, and if people want to find out and get the information, they very easily can. And I think this is a nationwide thing. This isn't a Bel Aire thing. We have a lot of apathy out there.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just to make sure the information's available, and
Bingo.
even before this is finalized, if we could put it on the website so that if people have feedback on it and they want to call any of us as council members, I think that would be great.
Sure.
And I also really appreciate what Jeff was bringing up around some specific measures and metrics, and I'm specifically interested in it around the city-owned land, which maybe could be thought of separately from planning out the map. But I'm definitely interested in working with everyone to see if we can set some goals and targets and measures for when do we think we will, how do we project out that the city-owned land is going to decrease over time? Because I heard from a lot of people that, our community wants to get out of the land development and land ownership business, and we need to be able to kind of show that, well, we started here 5 years ago, and 5 years from now, we think that we'll have this much land remaining in our land bank, and this is the progress we expect to make. So I think maybe that can even be a separate conversation from this, but
And
I'm
I would like to
definitely
point out
interested in
too,
that.
Mr. Jones has only been on retainer, I don't even think 6 months yet, so.
Yeah.
So we're still.
Yeah, I think we're making a lot of good
I
progress.
think it's either June or
Having
July.
some
I think
projections
that
would be
they-
good.
But
Yeah.
along those lines, is the other feedback that I've seen is that, they said we need to get out of the development business. Well, if we're not careful how we position this looks like we're solidly in the development business. Now, that's a decision we need to make.
Well,
Is that what we want to do?
In a way, we have to.
I
mean,
understand the way we have to.
Every city has to.
We've inherited that.
Because,
Right?
like you said, you can't just let anybody build anything they want, or,
Right, I get that.
Or come
So-
in and ask you to
so-
lower the price for what
Right,
it was
I
paid
mean,
for.
I think we're in a unique position that we can control it, which is good, and I don't think that we're in a position where we have to have a fire sale and get rid of all the land, but, I think with Mr. Jones and Mr. Penner here, I think that, continuing on, and like I said, it's a domino effect. If we can get the couple started, and then you're gonna have people follow. I mean, you're gonna have businesses follow the businesses, you're gonna have the housing continue to follow, you're gonna have the industrial continue to follow. And like Mr. Jones said, at that pivot point, and that's where we are. It is flipping, you know. I think all of us would like to have it go faster, but
Well,
I don't think any of us have millions of dollars to do it ourselves.
But the
So.
other side of it is, we all know, right now, this debt costs us $1 million a year. And that's going to go up to $1.5 million here in a couple of years, at least.
Which is why we're making these
And
steps
so
right now,
we-
what we're
we
making. So
really have to be
I,
aggressive with this thing, because that's fighting us really hard. I mean, it's 20% of our city budget. It's not 20% of.
yeah, I think if
And that-
all of us here had a magic wand, we would.
Right.
Well, that's why any ideas that you guys have are really important. So if you guys think of things that we as a city council can do to accelerate these land
Yeah.
sales, that's at the forefront and the top of my priority list at least.
So we look forward, and again, I'll just go circle back, that it was not that long ago that to get to a point where we could say we're now at the tipping point is exciting, guys. It really. So we're here, and I'm glad we're all here, and I'm glad we're able to move forward with a development plan. I mean, that speaks a lot, you know, that we have this plan, that we have these two gentlemen advocating and out there working for us. And appreciate all that you guys do, but at this point I want to see if anybody else has any more questions about specifically towards the master development plan. If not, gentlemen, I thank you guys for your time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Appreciate
We'll
it.
just continue it. And next we're going to move on to Public Works, so I'll bring Ann Stevens up.
Mr. Mayor, one question though. You said at the beginning that public input during the workshop isn't normal, but the policy says it is. And I do see that there are some citizens here. I don't know if they have anything they want to speak to, but I'd like to ask, we open it up to them if they would like to.
Yeah, does anyone in the audience have anything to speak to on the agenda?
Just the industrial park or?
On just any of the agenda
Any of
items?
the items on the agenda?
I didn't see the agenda.
Do you have an extra?
Yeah, no, normally we don't allow that, because we have all with the citizens input at meetings.
I understand.
Mr. Mayor, I specifically came because I want to find out about the road project, and I may have questions after you talk about it.
About the what?
The road,
And
the
I
Woodlawn.
also heard the comment that you're not thinking anybody cares about what's going on, but you're not letting people talk in any kind of public forum. So you've got to open it up, town hall meeting, something,
Yeah.
where people can come and make their concerns known.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we do those, and we'll continue to do that,
You don't
absolutely.
do it at the city council meeting, and you're not allowed to do it tonight at the workshop, so where do you do it?
We do it at the city council meeting. Any member,
You can make a speech. You cannot interact with the board.
yeah, we do have opportunities for that, so.
And I'm sorry, this forum, the mayor has to give you an opportunity to speak. The procedure
He
is,
asked a question, if any of us,
and you don't want to go back and
and I
forth.
try to get attention, so.
So we want to keep it somewhat formal. We want the mayor to invite you to speak, and then when he invites you to speak, you speak, and then when he's speaking, you don't. We'd ask that it stay that way if he decides to open it up to the public today.
So with that, we'll talk Public Works. The first thing is the Woodlawn reconstruction, the engineer request, the RFQ there. I think a lot of people know about this. We're going to receive some federal dollars that will go through WAMPO to reconstruct Woodlawn it's been designated just for 37th to 45th. I mean, we're still over 2 years away from anything happening from that starting, but long process. And so tonight, the only thing we're going to do with that is, and I'll staff and let Ann talk a little bit more about this, to begin the process of hiring an engineering firm. Then the engineering firm, from the RFQ, then they're the ones who will be able to go out and bring to us cost estimates, lane configuration, options, and look at everything that's available. I know there's all kinds of talk from 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, let the engineers tell us what's needed and what the cost would be with all that. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ann.
All right. One of the first things I want to make everyone aware of is as a federally funded project, this is not only what does Bel Aire want. A large part of this, everything, pretty much everything along this project has to get approval from KDOT in order to move forward. That is, the design configuration needs to get approval from KDOT. The consultant that we select needs to get approval from KDOT. The contractor needs to get approval from KDOT. Every piece of the process has to have approval. Where we're at this point is we've submitted a project programming request form. The project has been programmed through WAMPO in their TIP project, their Transportation Improvement Program, for construction slated in 2020. That doesn't mean that's a wish list. It is funded given that we do have federal funds available at that time. So I want that to be clear. The programming request has been submitted to KDOT. It was submitted last November. I did call KDOT because I hadn't heard anything. Finally, after about the fourth or fifth try, got in touch with the gentleman responsible for the programming of the local projects. He said he didn't have any knowledge of the project. I said, well, it was submitted back in November. So he went and talked to his staff. Oh, it's on so-and-so's desk. Well, at least it's somewhere. When do you expect us to hear something? He said, soon. What does soon mean? Is that a week? Is that a month? Is that a year? Give me some idea. Well, I can't really tell you. Everybody's sick with the flu. Well, I respect that. I would have appreciated, we're going to at least contact you in a month if you haven't heard anything. So in preparation for this meeting, I did call my contact with KDOT. I have not received a return phone call from him. I will continue trying to contact. But at this point, we're not even at square one. So until we get that project programming request approved through KDOT, we're nowhere.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident that it will go through KDOT. If there's some minor changes to what was originally submitted, we can deal with those. But at this point, we're still waiting for KDOT to approve that request. Once that request is approved and submitted back to us, we will be assigned a KDOT representative. I will be sitting down with that representative to outline the steps of the project to figure out we need to do A, then B, then C, then D. So we make sure that we follow all the regulations. This is my first time through a KDOT funded project, but I have lots of feelers out, lots of assistance in making sure that we do it the correct way. I want to make sure that it's correct and we don't have to redo things several times. When I did talk to the KDOT folks earlier, they pointed me towards this local projects LPA project development manual. And I reviewed that, and it does have a lot of steps in there that needs to be taken. And through my conversations with him and through this LPA, I did outline some brief steps that will need to occur so everybody is aware of the upcoming process. Just to go over that, once we get the approval from KDOT, we'll send out a letter of interest, a request for qualifications to a minimum of 5 qualified consultants. Ty and I already have a list that we have developed of consultants that we have worked with in the area that we believe are qualified to work on this project. KDOT may require us to open it up to more. I'm not sure how specifically that's going to work, but it does need to be a minimum of 5. The council will need to put together a selection committee of no less than 3 members. So 3, 5, 7, probably should be an odd number just to make sure that the voting is there, to review the qualifications packets once they're submitted back from consultants. I will review those initially, put together a report, and meet with the committee to review that. We'll select consultants to interview for the project, and it needs to be a qualifications-based selection. So we can't just select on the lowest fee. In order to get federal funds for the construction observation portion of the contract, it has to be qualifications-based. So unless we wanted to go out twice, we could do the initial study and design on a fee base and the the construction observation on a qualifications base, but then you're duplicating work. So may as well, it would be my opinion and Ty's opinion that we just do everything all at once and pick one consultant for this.
Can you explain what you mean by on a qualifications basis?
So you look at engineers. Have they done KDOT projects before? Have they done projects of similar scope in the Wichita area? What is their track record? Have those entities that they have worked for been satisfied with their work?
Okay.
You're looking, are they qualified to perform the design?
Okay.
So you don't want somebody from Timbuktu coming in here and saying, oh, I can work. I've worked on major highways. I've worked on I-70, I-35, I-80. Well, that's not a residential street, and or an arterial street, and there's different requirements and different issues associated with those.
So it's an experience-based
Correct.
selection. Okay.
Correct.
Doesn't KDOT have quite a bit of input on who you use?
They will, yes. They do have a list of qualified consultants, and I have not looked at that list specifically, but I would imagine that all of those that Ty and I have kind of initially pre-selected so far would be on that list. They've all done work in this area. They've all done similar scopes of projects.
And can you just define what is meant by the consultant, what exactly they would
An
do?
engineer.
Okay.
So somebody that is going to look through the design process, that's going to actually design the street. It needs to be this depth as far as the base. We need this section. These are what we're going to do for the storm sewer. They've gone through all the design modeling. Even before that, a study to look at our traffic counts, our future projections. What street do we need? That final section, kind of what street do we need, what street does the engineer suggest we build, would come up in that study. Once the project is designed, KDOT bids it out. It's the lowest contractor. As a second-class city, we have the option with non-federally funded projects of not choosing the lowest bidder. We don't have that option with this project. So the consultant engineer would also provide construction observation services. They will be out on the project every day, watching the contractor, making sure the project is installed as designed. If any issues come up, they're there to answer the questions. They usually have weekly meetings to go over the project schedule, any issues that come up, any proposed issues that might come up, they talk over those.
So it's the same engineer who does the design work is also
Correct.
supervising the project?
Correct.
So these engineers, the consulting engineer, is that individual or is that the firm?
It's a firm.
It's a firm. So
You don't want an individual with a
I
liability
didn't think-
issues.
I didn't think you did, but I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page. As all businesses, they have engineers so I assume we're gonna get a firm and say, part of our RFP process will say they must select an engineer and assign an engineer who will be through the life of the project. Is that the same thinking that you have on this?
Yeah, they will assign a specific point of contact. That
Right.
specific point of contact may vary throughout the process. It may be somebody during the study and design and somebody else during the construction, but that somebody else during the construction would be in close contact with the designer. And it may be they assign one point of contact through the whole project.
I just get a little concerned about the continuity of it.
Sure.
If it changes personnel. Okay?
Right.
Because, I've done a lot of projects before, and when it changes personnel, it just goes, oh my gosh.
I understand, and I will be intimately involved with the project and stay involved from beginning to the end. So I can provide some of that continuity, but it won't be on the design side. So, but yes, ideally, you do want one person throughout the whole project, but one person can't know everything, so they do.
Well, that's true.
Right.
And just to clarify, so when it comes to the actual physical construction of the new road, that company will be chosen by KDOT, that's not our...
Kind of. Chosen by KDOT is not really the correct terminology.
Okay.
Everybody will submit, all the contractors will submit a bid. I think I can do this project for $100 million. I think I can do it for $101 million. $100 million is gonna win, provided that they meet all of KDOT's qualifications.
So this is per Kansas law.
Correct.
How much influence do we have over who gets those bids? Do we have any influence on who gets bids?
I believe we have zero influence over who gets those bids.
So are we able to, since it's gonna be low fee based selection, is part of what we'll be doing is specifying quality measures that the road must meet, you know, how smooth it'll be, how thick it'll be, and all of those types of things?
Kind of. Those are all prescribed by KDOT.
Oh.
They have KDOT standard
You're not gonna win.
specifications.
Okay.
So,
So KDOT's gonna tell us how to
Yeah.
build our road in this
correct,
scenario?
correct.
'Cause they're
Since we're
giving
accepting
80%.
those federal dollars,
Okay,
it's one of those hoops that you gotta, those proverbial hoops that you gotta jump through. You've gotta accept that you're going to abide by their rules if you wanna accept their money.
so we can ask for things, but
Correct.
they have the decision rights there.
Correct.
All right.
And you generally don't get a say in specifics as far as like the smoothness. That's all per their well-established design criteria.
Okay. It just makes me worry, you know, if it's low cost that wins, you know, sometimes quality suffers as a result of
Correct.
cost.
And the one thing that we can do to kind of hedge our bets is in that construction observation.
Okay.
That's one thing with our 37th Street project. Wichita normally sticks it out until the top coat of asphalt is down. They stuck it out through the sidewalks because they were having issues with the contractor. So that's something that we need to be aware of. If we have good construction observation, a lot of times you can make up for some of the quality in construction. That construction observer that's on site all the time, no, that's not 4 inches, that's 3.5 inches, it needs to be 4, and make them fix it so it's 4. If they have issues, I'll step in. Okay, we can call KDOT and say, look, you guys aren't getting paid until this is fixed. So we've got a few hammers, but the best way to do it in this type of scenario is make sure that we've got good construction observation.
I mean, I know it sounds bad saying the lowest bid wins, but basically anybody who makes the bid is gonna be held to a certain standard.
Correct.
I mean, nobody's gonna pass that standard. I mean, you're not gonna go above and beyond the standard, but anybody, as long as, like Anna was saying, we just have to make sure they are held to that standard, and the road's gonna be done the same no matter who does it. I mean,
Right.
So.
For all intents and purposes.
I assume then that means that KDOT has qualified contractors, that they will only
Yes.
accept bids from these certain
Correct.
qualified contractors.
They have to pre-qualify, they have to do a certain percentage of the project themselves. They can't just be a project manager and sub out every single piece of the project. They have to have their own forces capable of constructing a certain percent.
But to your knowledge, KDOT has never had a problem with a road or a street or something that they've replaced.
Oh, there's problems all the time.
Well, I know there's
That's
problems,
why-
but it's all smoothed over because they make them do it right.
Correct. Sometimes there's problems that don't show up until long after the project's in. 45th Street, if you've driven between Webb and Greenwich, I don't know who put it in.
That
I
wasn't
know the
KDOT.
county paid for it. I don't know what sort of observation was handled, but if you drive down that, it's a roller coaster. And the worst of it is where there are pipes or boxes, any sort of storm sewer across the street.
Wasn't that Andover that did that? Andover paving?
Andale did not do
No.
this section.
I think it was Kansas paving.
They told me they didn't do it.
They didn't do it?
They did
Okay.
53rd Street.
I don't remember who did it.
I don't know.
The
What?
county-
No one's gonna take credit for it.
But,
Yeah.
Well, they know there's a problem, so they're not gonna admit it.
but that's something that, and I'm kind of speaking a little out of turn, if there was good construction observation, that's something that should have been picked up prior to the final payment of the project. And that should have been corrected. But it wasn't. I don't know how things happened, but with 37th Street, we didn't get that. So there's hope there. 37th Street was constructed under the same guidelines. So,
Mr. Mayor, I think the citizen had raised their hand a little bit ago. I don't know if they still have a question or if not, but it's your fault.
Are we done with this discussion?
So I wanted to go over the procedures. Once the city, kind of jumping back into the consultant, the committee will choose consultants to interview. They will choose their top, after the interview, they will choose their top choice. Once you have the top choice, you will enter into negotiations with that specific consultant for scope and fee. They will narrow down the scope, put item by item by item what they're gonna do, and this is how much it's gonna cost. If the city and the consultant cannot come to an agreement on the scope and the cost, then the city will go to the second place consultant and review the same thing. The specific scope and cost will go to KDOT for approval. Once that's approved by KDOT, we will enter into a three-party agreement between the city, the consultant, and KDOT for their services. KDOT ends up paying, I believe KDOT ends up paying for everything, and we write a check to KDOT. Specifically how that works with design, construction, study, I'm not entirely sure, so I'm looking forward to talking with our representative once we finally get the project approved. One more thing I wanted to make sure to discuss with you tonight is the traditional path is you have your plan for your street, so you select a consultant for design and construction. With all of the discussion about whether Woodlawn should be a 3-lane, a 5-lane, a 4-lane, a who knows what lane, part some, part others, I thought it would be best to have a study phase to the contract, have the consultant come in and look at all of our traffic counts, all of our projections, all of the development plans that we have, and come in with a better educated guess than what I have. They've got models and programs that they are very thorough with doing this and say, this is what we recommend, this is what it costs. This is what your Bel Aire's portion of the cost is gonna be.
Wait a minute, I recall that you told us that we couldn't change it from a 3-lane to a 5-lane or 7-lane if we wanted to get the money from WAMPO.
WAMPO's only gonna pay for what they originally.
She told us that it would not pay anything if we changed it from 3 to 5 lanes.
You know, they'll still get the same amount.
We'll get the same amount, but if we go anything above, and this is something we also need to work through with KDOT, which is why we need to get the KDOT project approved. This is a question I will specifically ask KDOT. But since there's been so many questions, we need to have somebody take a specific look at this Woodlawn projections, everything, and say, where are we at in 20 years?
I think that's an
I
excellent
love that
idea.
idea.
I think we need
I'm really
to do that.
excited about that.
And whether KDOT is willing
Yeah, because
to
several of us
participate.
wanted to go to a 5-lane, and she said we understood we couldn't.
Yeah, I
It's-
just think having someone with that expertise that
And that's something I
has
don't
those
have.
models needs to help us make that decision.
Right.
The other thing is, and I know Ann's worked really hard on this, so, you know, kudos to her, but
Well, I'm not saying
I'm
she's
not.
bad.
No, no.
God.
But I'm not certain that there's no ability at WAMPO to get more money. okay?
There-
Because they just approved another $1.5 million in expenses last week, or last meeting they had, okay? And on other projects. Now, I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying there
Yeah, but
there
those
may
are
be some
for future
opportunity.
years.
No, this is this year, 2018 projects. They just approved that. And then they pulled some 2019 projects into 2018 because they had excess money.
In discussions with WAMPO, the only way Woodlawn from 37th to 45th will get any more funds than is already allocated is if this project is scrapped and gone to WAMPO with a new proposal. There is no more funds there will be no additional funds for this
So
proposal.
we can't submit a TIP amendment and have them consider that.
That is my understanding.
Okay. But they do that all the time. So I mean,
They do
I
that,
don't know all
they
the
add
rules
other
here.
projects, they
Okay.
don't add money to an existing project. That's my understanding. could be not understanding something correctly, but.
Because I think that's what they did last week. They had money to take this project. I mean, I don't know, I'm
Right.
just learning, so.
Sure.
I'm not saying I'm in
The bottom line, it sounds like we all have a lot of questions here.
Right.
And certainly want to get as much information as possible. You know, and look at the study and see what it comes back with, and then we know what we have, and then if it is,
Right.
you know, let's say the study comes back and says that 3-lane is fantastic, and that's the only place we need it, great. If it comes back and says we need a 4-lane and it needs to go up to, you know, 254, then we go back with kind of like what you're talking about. But that's where we need to get the expertise, the answers before any of us make those decisions. So I applaud, I think, what you're doing and getting all that information before and getting started. And that's basically just kind of what you're doing, is getting the RFQ process started right now and then finding
Kind
out
of.
these questions from
We will be
KDOT.
getting that
Right.
started. One thing, as soon as that project programming request is approved from KDOT, then the council is going to need to appoint a committee to review and approve, or to review the RFP as well as as helping with consultants selection. If I remember correctly, there was a standard RFP that KDOT suggests you use, but it can be amended, and it will have to be amended in our case with the study phase. And once we get KDOT on board and get their contact, then we'll figure out if that has to be a separate RFP, if it can piggyback with the design and construction, which I believe it can, since design is paid for using city funds. Then I think it'll all work out, but I have questions that need to make sure that we're on board with KDOT, as do the rest of you.
I mean, I think this is fantastic because, you know, like I said, the engineer that we hired to take a look at this can tell us, you know, not only if they think we need a 3 or 4 or 5 lane, but the difference in cost price. I mean, you're talking right of ways, you're talking utilities moving, you're talking about, you know, the 10-foot walk bike path down Woodlawn that's there now for the 3-lane. You know,
Right.
Is there even room for that if we did need a wider road? Then you're talking about public safety again, where, you know, I think the walkway is important because you have people walking down Woodlawn now, and especially at night, it's very dangerous. So, you know, I think that's where.
For easements too.
Right of ways. I mean, you're talking about,
Big
you know,
time.
going a lot wider. So, I think if we can get that information to actually look, and, you know, I know Mr. Bernard said, you know, it is $1 million per mile, but that's strictly construction on the road. That doesn't include if you have to buy land and
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what the.
so
Yeah.
so that's why I
We need
that's
to
why I
know.
think getting that information is going to be hugely important, and to show it for us, but to show everybody and
Right.
the differences between these. And I mean, because from what I've been told, is a 3-lane is much safer than a 4-lane because you have a buffer zone. You have less lanes of traffic to cross, getting out of a neighborhood.
Correct.
Instead of having 2 full lanes that people are moving back and forth, only 1 lane and then get into the turn lane. So to get that information, I think is just going to be huge and really be able to educate everybody with it.
Yeah.
So.
And they'll be able to provide you with options. If A is too expensive, what about B? They can provide you with a menu, hopefully, of pick and choose, so we can get the best value, really, and something that we can afford.
Part of that would be a survey so that they know what the right-of-ways that are there existing, or is that information that's already platted in the hand?
The information is already available as far as the specific right-of-ways. That's all on the county GIS site, available to anybody.
Okay.
That I do know we are going to have to get some right-of-way in the northwest corner of 45th and Woodlawn to match the right-of-way that we currently have on the southwest corner. That's the empty field that Brookhauser used to have. So at this point, it should be fairly attainable. That was the only right-of-way that we really needed with the 3-lane concept. How that would change going larger, I don't know. But that is definitely something to keep in mind, that a consultant will be very easily able to help us out with.
When would the study start? What kind of timeline are you thinking about here?
Soon. I'd hoped, I had hoped that I would have heard from KDOT from that by now.
Yeah.
But it's been a month and a half.
A lot of people
I
have.
don't know.
It's been
The
bad
whole,
this
whole
year.
department's out for flu.
The other question I had was around the funding. You'd mentioned that right now the funding's not guaranteed. At what point does that funding become guaranteed? Is that when the project is approved by KDOT?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would rather say that
Yep.
than give you a wrong answer.
Good.
Yep.
It is allocated by WAMPO with their projected funding allocations through the feds. Now, budgets change, different presidents have different priorities. So, until we really get there, it's not guaranteed.
So when they
We
close
can-
one lane down, we know.
Well, that's my
We see
question.
one
That's kind of my question
When the
is,
project-
when the project starts, will it be
When the
guaranteed?
project is let by KDOT, that money is there, it's allocated, it's sitting in the bank and has Bel Aire's name on it.
Okay.
So when it's actually bid, the
Just wondered
only
if there was
thing-
any risk to the city that
The
they could pull
risk-
funding at the last minute, we'd be stuck with the $8 million project.
The risk is in the study phase and the design phase, and they usually like the utilities to be pushed out of the way before the project starts.
Okay.
And you are talking close to $800 million, or $800,000. I speak correctly to that.
It's like, whoa, take the streets up
For the study, the design, and the
The governor
utilities.
just picked up the phone.
And utilities, we may be able to push that back till closer to project start.
Do we have a ballpark on what the studies cost and if?
Studies, I don't know. I haven't looked into that. Mr. Gish behind me may be able to give us a very rough estimate. The design, I believe, was estimated at about $500,000.
Okay. And that's money that'll have to come out of our streets?
No, we've actually approved a temp note on several projects we rolled together, and we put money in that. So
In
it's sitting in our
anticipation
bank
for this.
to
Okay.
start payment of that.
And that note, if I remember, refresh me what that note does.
Basically, we can borrow money for up to 3 years at a very low interest. I think we got 0.8% interest, or it was pretty low. And then at the end of the 3 years, we have to take out permanent financing. So the idea was we would use the temp note to fund the initial pieces, and then when the project is let, we know how much the city's going to have to pay, then we'll roll the engineering along with the actual project into one bond, 20-year bond, and then we'll just make annual payments for that.
Okay.
Well, Ann, thank you for that. And tell you, I'm going to be a little bit off track here because I do want to keep us on track. I guess I know Councilmember Benaj has asked a couple times about questions from the audience. So you guys are here. I got to tell you guys, I can't remember the last time we had an audience at a workshop. So I appreciate you guys being here and being here for a while. Yeah, we normally don't do this, but do want to let everybody know there's lots of different options to address council. Anybody can ask to be on a council agenda at any time. We do have citizens' concerns at any of our meetings. You can request a meeting by email, phone call to any of us at any time. We'd be happy to do that. That's in addition to public hearings and when we do have town hall meetings. But like I said, we don't normally do this. I want to keep us on track, but I'm kind of guessing maybe if anybody in the audience did have a question or wanted to ask a question about that, I think we could allow that at this time. I'm going to Black Cat, because I saw you first. I'm so sorry.
Actually, I'm here from the Northbrook HOA Association. And I just wanted to emphasize the fact that that's 37th Street is the only access that we have to that neighborhood. 120 homes in there. So 39, okay. I knew what I meant. Anyway, just wanted to emphasize the fact that don't forget us. I mean, I know we're not part of Bel Aire. We're kind of out there hanging off the edge, but it's our only access, and there's no other way of getting in and out of that area down there.
Well,
Whatever happens, whatever y'all do is really going to affect us.
well, and I'll say the same thing because I live off of Woodlawn as well. And that Woodlawn is the only way to get in and out of my neighborhood too. And I mean, I imagine that they will make it so that traffic will only go one way for a time, and then traffic will only go the other way for a time. It's going to be inconvenient, but I think the end result will be worth it. I mean,
Appreciate your comment on that, absolutely.
Didn't forget us.
All right, I saw another hand over here. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask a quick general question for the new council members. Are you aware that KDOT LPA program is a reimbursement program that the city will have to fund the entire project and then receive reimbursement from KDOT?
I think that's some of what we're looking to understand with our contact with KDOT. That's kind of where my questions were headed, is how does that all work?
Well, the only reason I mention that is from my previous job in Kansas City, Missouri. I was an LPA inspector there, became aware of the process, and also all of your right-of-way and your utility and your engineering costs will be incurred directly by the city and will not be reimbursed. Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else over here? Yeah. So you guys are welcome to stay for the rest of our workshop, and
He was talking about Woodlawn.
No, I think you covered my question.
yeah. I looked. I want to make sure. And again, like I said, yeah, I can't remember having an audience at a workshop before, and we're all taped and we're all live. And feel free to come to any of our meetings anytime. We're open, and you guys, like I said, want to be on any agenda or speak to council, please do so. I did not want anybody to feel they could not be heard. So, but appreciate you guys being here, and do that. With that, we're going to get back onto the agenda then, which next is continuing with Ann talking about street repairs.
All right, I was asked to prepare information for the meeting regarding our plans for funding in 2018. If you actually look at page 2 regarding the financial, this is probably the best place to start. For fiscal year 2017 and 2018, there's $800,000 available. There was $400,000 allocated in 2017 and $400,000 allocated in 2018. So I've kind of itemized the different projects that we have paid money on. The council in 2017 authorized improvements for 53rd Street. The intent for that was to pay those out of the capital improvement project program fund and reimburse the fund for the amount of that project when 2018 came and the funds, the $400,000 was available again. So after all of those expenses, there's a total cash available of $120,386.30 left for 2018. And that is with moving the $310,395 back to the capital improvement program. That is something that our finance director stressed needed to be done. That is for him to debate with you and your decision. So I went with the $120,000. For those $120,000, the significant projects that we will outsource for this year: thermal crack repairs on Greenwich from the city limits to 45th Street, thermal crack repairs on Webb Road from the city limits to 45th Street, concrete curb and gutter repair, various locations throughout the city. I have locations that have been on this list for the past 2.5 years that residents keep calling. When are you gonna fix my curb? When I get money. So I'm really stressing that those can get done this year. And then the rehabilitation of 46th Street east of Baton. I've included a picture of 46th Street. It was never really paved in an engineering paved sense. What it appears is that we had some spare loads of asphalt, or they picked a load or two of asphalt, laid it down, shaped it with a grader, and rolled it. It's not much of a prepared surface. It's awful.
And let me guess, no one's going to take credit for doing that either.
Well, it was certainly before my time.
It wasn't before mine.
Wow.
Betty took credit for it.
We did just what she said.
Yeah.
Or
So
they
there-
did. I didn't.
this says, just to educate me a little bit, this says patch repair, but will that will that go over with the roller then and make that smooth
So-
as well, or how does that work?
There's 4 residents that directly go onto this road.
Yeah, I know.
So
what
it's
you're
not a
talking about.
highly
Yeah.
traveled road.
No.
And in the interest of trying to do the most we can for the money that we have available, we suggested cutting out the worst areas of that road and patching them.
Okay,
So they're
it's
not
kinda like
getting
we
a
did
whole
on
new road.
53rd between Oliver and Woodlawn.
Correct, exactly. So they're not getting a whole new road, but it will be passable. It will still be bumpy, but you won't have foot-deep craters, and the police cars won't get stuck. So I told our police chief, I said, you just need to drive those SUVs you have out there and stop taking your little ponies out there. But they just laughed.
Isn't this road isn't this Baton the one that washed out several years ago?
I
When
don't-
we had that hard rain? I think it was before your time.
Baton is the one. This is 46. So this comes off of Baton.
Okay.
But the one that you're thinking of was repaired with a concrete flume and patch over there. So that's been fairly stable. So my suggestion is, and they've been concerned, expressing their concerns for the past several years, and
Looking at the picture, I can see why.
just,
Yeah, it looks really bad.
Have you seen Belmore? Have you been over on Belmore?
yeah, it's bad too.
So.
For less than $10,000, I think we get this fixed. Belmore is gonna be much more expensive to fix.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it needs a lot more work, a lot more residences, a lot more highly traveled.
I'm surprised
than this
those
one.
people haven't really, it was like Gunnison before we redid it.
Yeah, Belmore is bad and Baton is
Oh.
bad.
So, the only concern I have here, I'm not saying any
Sure.
of these projects aren't very worthy, because I know they are, okay, and I know that we have
Right.
set priorities, but I just, the feedback I've gotten, I think other council members maybe have gotten in campaigning, is that the old Bel Air feels like they're being neglected and forgotten about. And the two
They have
things
for
you're doing
years.
here for them is the 46th Street project, which is a very short block, and I get that, and the concrete curb gutter repair, which is needed too.
Right. The
So
other
it's a
thing
good thing, but-
that's not included in here is work that my staff is going to be doing themselves,
Oh, okay.
which is, we're gonna be doing a lot of thermal crack repair ourselves. So if you've been up Farmstead, that's what we're doing.
Good.
And our intent, we have a listing that I left in the office on my transition between meetings, is to touch as many neighborhoods as we can. And that's something that we can easily do in-house. It takes us a little bit longer, but we're very capable of doing it. We can touch the different areas and it takes less time. If there was more money available, I would like to farm out some more of that thermal crack repair so we could hit more areas. I'd like to start sealing some streets. Because once we can get these streets sealed where the water's not infiltrating the ground, they're gonna last a lot longer.
Is that the,
What kind
like
of
the
seal are
slurry
you
mix
talking
that?
The slurry or the HA5, there's a Reclamite product that's out there that puts a clear oil on top of it.
Do the thermal cracks have to be repaired before you put that on top?
Yes, the thermal crack repair is the first step to doing any of that. Wichita on their 37th Street between Rock and Woodlawn did what they call microsurfacing. The first step of that project, fix all the cracks, fix all the patches. They went and sealed them with tar. They put in a leveling course of asphalt in and then came in with a new microsurfacing. It's maybe an inch thick, if that, on top. So it looks like you've got a brand new road for half the cost.
So is it gonna be an issue that we're gonna do the thermal crack repairs this year and then it may be another year before we can do the sealants?
No.
Okay.
On 45th Street, we did the thermal crack repairs between Woodlawn and Rock 4 years ago. We've done them on 45th between Woodlawn and Oliver multiple years ago. It's the first step in any process. It doesn't have to be the final step, but it could be the final step depending on the funds that we have available.
Okay.
So if we at least get this started, then we're better set to do more intensive rehab in the future.
We aren't gonna do any more of that black stuff that it looks like tar you just pour over on the top of it. They did it years ago on Memphis and I can't remember what other streets, but it was like a slurry seal.
It's a slurry seal product. They put the tar down and then come with the gravel surfacing, chip seal is what it's called, I believe.
We aren't doing that, are we?
Not here. That is a solution that's
Man,
available.
we got more phone calls on that to
It's-
come clean their carpets because their kids tracked in the tar and got inside their cars. And,
It's a mess.
and the animals
mess.
got it.
It's not-
Oh, it was awful.
It's a solution available, not one of the most ideal solutions, but it is something that's
Well,
available.
back then, we didn't have any money and we had to do something.
Right. So
It was cheap, but
So it looks like there's a discrepancy
horrible.
between
There's-
cash available and our projected.
once we went through
Expenses.
and got once we went through and got the costs for each of these, we're about $20,000 over. So I'm not sure how,
Now, what about the, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to, are these quoted costs?
these are quoted costs. I did have quotes for you
Oh,
in your packet.
I was gonna ask that, is there a way to go back and say, hey, is there any way that, does every single thing have to be done type thing? Or I know in street repairs, you don't wanna
Right, and that's,
shortchange.
that's something that we could certainly pull one of these out. Greenwich has been on our radar for the past several years. All of these, they have their merits, and it's hard to kind of pick one or the other. The things that I really think have to happen this year is that curb and gutter repair and the repair of 46th Street. And those are the cheapest ones.
The curb and gutter, what were the
Thanks,
locations of
Brian.
those?
They are all over. On the second from last page,
Oh,
there's a listing of addresses, rough locations of all those. There's not really one that's more important than the other.
So what about are there expenses associated with the thermal crack repairs that the staff is gonna do that will also contribute to this?
The staff, all of the work that's done in-house, it's just a material cost. We have a line item
Okay.
for street repair
So
materials.
the materials are already covered
The
in
materials are
budget.
already covered. I believe that's about $30,000, 30
Okay.
to 50.
So maybe this is what, I'm not sure if this is what the mayor was trying to ask, but like on the Greenwich Road or the Webb Road, if there are 10 thermal cracks, is there an option to repair 8 of them to help us get down to our budget there?
Not
Is that
ideally.
maybe where
Yeah,
your
yeah, that's
question is
kind
going?
of, is there a way to shave that we can at least
What-
address all these or?
And what we could do, because these are both, city limits to 45th, we could look at going from 53rd to 45th this year, and then the rest of it next year. It's generally, it's quantities of scale, economies of scale, you
Yeah,
generally get better
yeah.
prices by the more that you do and the closer that they are together.
So we'd be advantaged if there was somewhere else that we could reduce $20,000.
Correct, and that would be a question for Ted.
Yeah.
Without talking to him, my initial thought is, well, can we maybe not reimburse a CIP for 20,000?
yeah, right.
Well, let me ask this.
He's got
I don't know.
one too.
Yeah.
That's Ted.
Is that something we're tied, would you be able to ask Ted and see if there
Yeah.
is a way that?
Yeah, we'll look into it and see what amounts in there, what we've got budgeted to come out of that, and what the reserves are. And yeah, that was my thought is, let me visit with him, look over the budget, CIP, and see if we can not move that full 310 over. So yeah, I'd like to look at that.
Yeah, streets were one of the biggest things that I heard about from people going door to door, and so anything that we could do to add to that budget and do more.
And it's
Yeah.
amazing, the more you start out there working, the more
More they want.
you find, the more you hear.
It's like that
Well,
summer I
so-
decided to replace 2 pieces of siding on my house.
And then you ended up doing the whole house.
Yep.
so just the discussion of economies of scale, and I get that.
Right.
I'm not saying don't do that, but have we talked about that with those two contractors about, is there a way you can do part of this one year, part next year without increasing cost? And I'm not saying there is, but it's just a question.
It certainly could be asked.
Okay.
It has not been asked, but it could be asked.
Because I know sometimes, you know,
Right.
a project is going to go this big, and to go any bigger, you're just going to see whatever that cost is.
Sure.
And other times, there's an economy of scale.
Yeah,
So,
and
I don't know in this case.
PP&J, we work with them a lot.
uh-huh.
They are our go-to contractor for small patchwork. They do a great job, and they're very reasonably priced, so they might be willing to work with us going forward.
The other thing we've noticed is timing. You know, these contractors have certain times where they're much busier than other times. And if we can wait, you know, if we can get started early where they're not as busy, they can give us a little better price, or we wait till they get a major project done. And typically we're able to do that, you know, put off a project or something because it's not that important to us, you know, seal cracking, or the thermal cracking. So we can visit with them and say, okay, if we, you know, contract with you to do all these, is there a certain time of the year that maybe you can give us a better price, and we work with you on that?
Or maybe sometime you do it, you got the project, you got to do it sometime this year, you decide when it is.
Exactly.
Whatever works best.
Yeah.
See if we can get a better price that way, yeah.
So we've got a couple of things you guys can do. Talk to Ted about the additional funds. At the same time, if we do find the additional funds, absolutely see about finding a way to save money, I think.
Is that your preference? Is first priority is to see if we can find additional funds?
Yeah.
Second
Yep.
priority would be to see if we
Yep.
can cut down the 20,000.
Yeah, I'd like to see us, if we can move money around, however, you know, that makes sense, not that, but I'd like to prioritize this as something that's one of our, if not the highest item, the top item is priority for money.
Sure.
But I would still say, even if we do that, I'd still like the idea of kind of what we talked about here, going back and saying, hey, we'll give you, I know it says 80,000, but how about if we pay you 65,000, you pick what time of year to do it or something. See
Yeah.
if then we find the money, maybe we have a little bit more to do, a little bit more too.
Sure.
Yeah, and maybe we can, you know, like you said, outsource some additional, if we can say, we'll outsource some additional and just get that much more work done. So, yeah.
Were we
That's
looking
awesome.
at, I know with road repair, maybe it's not something that's quite as readily available, but what about as far as looking at programs that are either offered by the state or even the county, or have we exhausted all possibilities for getting some kind of grant or anything like that? Like, I don't know if we have or not. I just I want us to like really explore all possible options for, like, maybe there's, I mean, was it last year or a couple of years ago, there was that kind of experimental patch system. It ended up being an expensive thing, but is there maybe anything that because I know, Ann, you're going to the
different conferences.
all the conferences
right.
and stuff to find that stuff out. Is there anything new that we know about
Not to my
lately?
knowledge. This year I'm going to try and attend the Public Works Association conference. I haven't been able to attend due to other conflicts. I'm going to try and attend that. That's where all the Public Works officials really congregate, as opposed to some of the other conferences where it's geared to different interest groups. But I'm going to attend that and see, like you said, if there's any different products, talk to different people and see if
As
there's
far
other
as the
opportunities.
grants go, this is a good time to kind of explain, because we talked a lot about KDOT and WAMPO in this project. So the way the federal government works is they have whatever they budget for street projects for each state. And then the state Department of Transportation gets that. And then the feds require that if you're in a metro, there be a metropolitan planning organization that doles out that money. So that's why we have WAMPO, Wichita Area, Kansas City, they've got one as well. So our two, those two areas are metropolitan, so the money then gets funneled to them, and then we then apply to WAMPO competitively against all the other cities in WAMPO to get money. And so then when you do get a project, then because the money went to KDOT and then to WAMPO, that's why KDOT's so involved in the because it's federal funding. Now, the KDOT can give money to smaller counties and cities if you're not in a metropolitan area. So if we want any kind of federal dollars, or state dollars for that matter, because it's kind of funneled through, we have to go through WAMPO. And so, so that's why it's difficult for us to find money, because we're in a metropolitan area and we have to competitively try to get projects in with Wichita, Sedgwick County, you know, everybody else. So that's the difficult part of grants. The other thing that we run into is for federal dollars and grants, they approve projects that are arterial streets. So that's why we're getting Woodlawn, and we can, you know, certainly Ann and I have got to talk about in the next 5 years, what's our, you know, it's 45th is rock. You know, we need to have something every 5 years in the program with WAMPO so we can get road improvements. But they don't have money available for neighborhood streets. So that's all on us. So hope that answers your question about grants and how that stuff works, and why KDOT's so much involved in this Woodlawn is because, you know, 80% of the funding is coming from federal dollars, so they kind of have to oversee that. So.
And they really don't fund maintenance projects.
Right.
It's just expansion.
Sure.
They don't want cities to build more than they can maintain, which unfortunately, when you don't have the tax base, it happens easily, or the economic downturn.
Okay, anything else for Public Works?
One thing that I'll mention, when I went to the Sedgwick County Association of Cities meeting, they did mention that on March 28th, WAMPO is going to do a class on road maintenance, and I think that's open to anyone that wants to go. It sounded kind of interesting, so.
Teach us how to do thermal crack.
Well, I think, yeah. I think it's just kind of on different strategies for how to prioritize and improve those types of things, so if anyone's interested in that, I wanted to just share that.
It's going to be very similar to the presentation that I emailed all of you that Wichita did in front of WAMPO. They're going to be reviewing their maintenance procedures and how they select their streets and kind of their mix of what they're doing. That's going to be a majority of it.
They have a software application they're using to do their priority?
Yes, Excel.
Oh, it's Excel? Okay. We all have that.
But it's the programming behind the software.
Oh, okay.
And I know they did hire a consultant to develop that for them.
But they just come up with some macros in Excel to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Ann, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Bryan, we'll let you come up, and appreciate you sitting through this. And here we are. This is something that we have done every year. We've had a fantastic working relationship with Sunrise, where they really do give a lot of benefit to the rec center, you know, as far as letting the ball fields are not in use by our rec center in March and April. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian. And so what we've done is we let the Sunrise, I think they have, 6 games? It's not very many, but they actually do go out there and pick up all the rocks and all the gravel and break in the field so it's ready for our rec department. And there's other things that they do for us, and we'd always just kind of, you know, let them use it with the idea that we could use their brush pile. We could get some other benefits from that. Then the previous council last year decided they wanted to charge for that instead of getting the benefiting of Brian had asked, saying, hey, this is fantastic, it really helps us. So this agreement comes up every year. There was a little bit of history here. 5 or 6 years ago, we did not even have a written agreement. It was a handshake, and that's what our attorney at the time, Allison McKinney Brown, and Ty and I remember, all three of us kind of went, how do we not have this? We must, we must get something in writing that addresses liability for the most part. So, Brian, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Depends on how far you want me to go back. If you've read my report, it pretty much goes back to the beginning of Bel Aire Rec and where we're at today. The the document that we came up with a number of years ago was very beneficial to us because we were able to spell out our expectations, what they can do, what we don't want them to do, what our responsibilities are. And at the beginning, there was still no charge. The council felt that there needed to be some charge, and so last year agreed to charge them for the reservations that they made. So basically, they reserved for games only last year. Although they did drop in and practice a lot, they just reserved the fields for their games. They reserved 18 different dates for softball and baseball. Very minimal charge, which basically paid us to go out there and drag the field. So they've been a good neighbor. They do stuff for the rec center. You know, in the big scope of thing, this is pretty small, but it does have interest of a lot of people and has been somewhat talked about a lot back and forth for a number of years. So that's why we brought it to you. We just wanted to show you where we're at and see if you want to continue what happened last year. Do we want to go back? Do we want to move forward? We're basically recommending that in this document and the agreement that we just continue to charge them for when they reserve the fields. Doesn't affect any Bel Aire rec programs. We really don't get going until May, so they're done at the end of April, and there's some crossover where we have to do some scheduling, but for the most part, it does not affect our programming by allowing Sunrise's use of the facilities.
One question, and maybe I just missed it, but I don't see anything in here about the $11 per.
We charged them $11 per 2 hours last year.
I didn't see it in the contract, so am I just overlooking it?
It is probably not here because if we want to get your idea of what you want to do again.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So we charge them $11 for every 2 hours.
Okay.
Now, I
Is
am
that
up.
what we charge the other people too?
That's what we charge anybody that wants to reserve the field. Very few people reserve the field. Occasionally, but there are 6 fields out there, so generally there's something that somebody can get on to drop in on.
So last year, if I remember in the notes here, and I don't remember where it was, but we collected like $196.
It's $200, $198.
Just $200. Okay.
Yeah, $198.
So I'm almost wondering, is that worth even going through the hassle of billing and invoicing and all that stuff? You know?
Well, and the other question I had is you mentioned that, I think in your staff report that we use the Sunrise parking lot.
There's some things that Sunrise do, you know, kind of help us out. They distribute things through their school. They allow parking on their property during the games. They help us with the fields when we have issues that we need to clean up, as do other groups. I mean, we have similar type of agreements and things like with this Wichita School District. They distribute stuff from us, and we let them come over and do a play day once a year. So there's other groups besides Sunrise that we do this. They're the main ones. They're our neighbors. So they're there during baseball season and softball season. Track teams run around the facility. Cross-country teams run around the facility. So it's a presence pretty much year-round, except for now when it's icing and raining and things like that.
They're not doing that today?
I did see one guy running through the field today, and I wondered what the heck he was doing. And I wasn't going to go out there and tell him to get off the field.
Well, I guess
I don't understand. You say you recommended on your staff report that we still charge them, but you don't have it in the agreement. What do you mean?
This, you know what, I don't know why it's not in here.
This is just boiler.
Yeah, this is just a proposal.
Boilerplate.
What's that?
Standard agreement.
Just standard.
Has not been-
So if we do decide we want to charge them again, we can put that in here. I'm recommending that we charge them what we charged them last year, although we're going to talk about fees here in a little bit, and I am proposing increases in all the rec center fees. So it's going from $11, I'm going to propose $13 instead of, and I'll get to that. It's not a big amount.
$1,700.
It's not a big amount, you know.
I don't think that's a line there.
My honest opinion of these rates, and I'm not suggesting that we should raise these rates, but my honest opinion is the hassle factor of these things probably cost the city more than just doing the good neighbor policy that you've been doing, okay? I think staff is time spent for $200 for the building is not value added.
But basically, they wrote us a check at the end of the year for the number of games that they reserved it for.
Okay.
And they sent it to us. I mean, we didn't even bill them.
Have they seen this agreement?
They have not. This is essentially similar to last year with some different wording.
How do you know they're gonna agree to it?
I don't.
Well,
I don't.
I don't wanna push something off on them
I
that
don't.
they haven't
Yeah.
seen.
I don't. The wording in this is the same that it's been for 4 or 5 years, except for the fee. That was different last year. We did not charge them until last year for anything.
So in essence, they've seen this agreement.
They've seen this agreement for the last 4 years.
Well, I just didn't wanna push
Yeah.
anything off on them if they hadn't even,
Yeah.
you said, well, we haven't seen that. so
And
we're not
this is
gonna-
basically a liability agreement.
This is agreement.
As it exists right now.
This is what we're gonna do, this is what we want you to do. The only time we have involved with this is we do drag the fields for their games. Okay, that means we're using our equipment, we're using our fuel, we're using our manpower to go out there, depending on how bad a shape it's in. It takes anywhere from 15 minutes per field to maybe an hour per field. That's the only expense that we have. Outside of that, it's normal what we do anyway. But that's the only thing above and beyond that we do, is we will drag that field for them. We feel we want to drag it because we want to do it the way we do it. We don't want to put that liability on them. So,
And I would like to
so
point out,
that would be the only expense, is that 30 minutes, that hour, however long it takes to go out there and prepare that field. They chalk it, they put the bases out, they clean it up afterwards. That's really the only thing that we do, is drag that field before every
So
game.
you're saying the $11 for every 2 hours pays for your maintenance or your guys to go?
It pays for
drag
their,
the field
it pays for
and
their
all that
wage.
stuff?
It does pay for their wage.
Okay.
I do want to say one thing. I know when we had this conversation last year, and as Brian said, this is, brings up a lot of emotion with a lot of different people, a lot of different avenues. And I made a comment last year that everything that Sunrise did, like I said, helping with the field, like you just mentioned, they still, they clean up afterwards, they get the fields broken in and everything picked up. And I made the comment that we should not expect Sunrise to continue to do all of this if we're going to charge them, because we're changing them from being a neighbor to a customer. Somehow that got misconstrued from a couple of council members that kept saying that Sunrise said we will not do it. Sunrise never said that. In fact, Sunrise continued to still do all this and help out Bel Aire, even though we still charge them. And I just want to go on record pointing that out, that they continue to be the good neighbor. And they never ever once demanded, never ever once said or threatened, I think was the word. They never threatened that. That was, I'm the one who said we should not expect it. And we didn't expect it, and they still did it.
Well, I think that we need to make sure we're treating everyone fairly that wants to reserve the fields. That being said, if Sunrise is providing things of value to the city that other people aren't providing, it's like we need to provide them a credit for the services that they're providing to us. And I don't know what the value of those services are, but in the interest of fairness, I think that everyone needs to pay the same reservation fee. But if you're providing a service to us, then that's got to offset something.
They do a lot more than $200 at times. About every 3 years, we have to put new infield material on. It's a raw material we buy locally, and it's trashy. I mean, it's rocky, and we have to pick stuff out of it, and there's no machine that can do that. And they help. They do $200 worth of picking up rocks every 3 years, I'll guarantee you. Now, other groups help us too. I mean, we have Girl Scouts come out there, help us, and kids on spring break and National Honor Society. We use all kinds of people, staff, our coaches, our kids, and it's about a 2-month-long process when we get that stuff. Fortunately, we didn't have big rains last year, and the wind didn't blow all the material away. We didn't have to put anything down. Next year, we may, depends on the weather. And it's an expensive product, even though it's local, it's still about a tenth of what it would cost if we were to get the engineered bagged stuff that, colleges and high schools and pros use.
So basically, we'll need to decide at our next council meeting if we want to charge them the approximate $200 or if we want to quid pro quo, you know what I mean?
Well, I think they should see, Reverend Linstead should see the agreement before the next council meeting too. And if he agrees to it, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think it's important that as a city we, encourage the type of relationship that the city has with any entity. Sunrise has a unique location in that it's physically right next to the rec center, and that, just geographically, they're as close as a neighbor as you can get. And, I think we need to continue to have policies in place, such as this one, that encourages that relationship, that nurtures that relationship. I think this is good. I think it seems like the history of the relationship between the city of Bel Aire and Sunrise, and especially through the rec center and the athletic fields and activities, I think we need to encourage that relationship, as much as we can. I think I think what we have here is great. I'm finished.
I just don't go with town. Can we encourage them to send more players to WSU?
Wrong sport. Wrong sport.
Right.
Basketball, soccer, basketball. Oh.
Yeah, but this is baseball, softball.
Okay, I get it, okay. I assume Jackie's has reviewed this. Okay, I didn't want us to be doing something that you had reviewed, but.
So I guess our question is, which route do you want us to take when you go into your council meeting? Do we want to do this as we used to? Do we want to charge them? Do we want to look at charging them more? I guess that's our question.
Obviously, we can't take binding action here, but we
Right.
can certainly give a consensus if we want to have you. That way you can approach Dr. Linstead and,
I have visited with the Sunrise folks and told them that there are essentially no changes in what is being proposed to the city council.
so Jackie will stop me if I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing here, but can we just go around the horn and kind of just get a feel? Basically, we're talking, the options are more, the same, approximate 200, or no charge as long as they continue doing what they're doing, right?
And you're asking like a general opinion on that?
General opinion, yes, so that we can get, so that then Brian can approach
Before we do that-
before our next council
A
meeting.
consensus.
Can I ask
Okay.
a question before we
Yeah.
get there? So what was the timeline that the $11 fee was being charged?
Their games typically start end of March, 1st of April, but they'll be dropping in for practice very soon.
But when did we start? How many years back did we start charging them?
Just last year.
That was just okay.
Last year
That's
was
what I
our
thought. I
first
just want to
Everybody,
make sure
not
of that.
just them.
What's that?
We charge everybody, not just them, correct?
Anyone that wants to reserve the field.
Okay.
Is charged. Basically, that just pays for us sitting down and signing a form and saying, you got the field Saturday from 3 to 5.
I mean, they basically use the fields when nobody from the rec center does. I mean, there's no programs, baseball,
For the most part,
softball
yes.
going on that's interrupting anything anyway. So they're
Exactly.
using it when they're open. I mean,
During the day and before we begin our games. Our games don't start till May. They're done. April 29th is their last scheduled game this year.
That's the way schools are.
Yeah.
And probably one of the biggest benefits.
That's why it's worked, because their season's before ours.
Yeah, and probably one of the biggest benefits that they give to us when we didn't charge and when we did charge was lots of cars would be parked on Bel Aire streets during rec center during summer months if they didn't allow parking, didn't allow us to use the parking.
Yeah.
well, it's not only that. I mean, my son played at the Bel Aire Rec Center on baseball and everything, and when they did allow us to park there. Unfortunately, the people that weren't even part of Sunrise, when they were parking there, they were leaving trash in the Sunrise parking lots. And I mean, that's one thing, if we can maybe get some signs or something that when the people for the rec center games are parking in their parking lot, make sure they're cleaning them after themselves as well. Because I saw a lot of Gatorade bottles and all kinds of stuff left on their property from what's going on in
That
the
does
park
get
for
picked
us.
up generally by our staff.
Yeah.
And that's a trade-out. I mean, they do the same thing.
But I think that's a huge advantage is being able to park right there because, that far ball field is a long way, especially if you got to park way down the street. So,
if you were charging $5 a car for parking, I think that the value of that parking well exceeds the $200 a year. And so I guess my initial thought would be that it sounds like you're comfortable that Sunrise is providing us way more in services than what the cost is, and given the overhead of managing the building of that anyway, I would be inclined to think that they shouldn't be charged for that.
Okay.
I agree.
So,
I don't think we should charge anyone, because the rec center, the city hall, everything's already paid by city taxes, and if you have children and they're using these ball fields or they're using different facilities, why are we charging them?
well, for the most part, people aren't charged to use the fields. They just they kind of
It
come
says
up with
here
their
they're charging
that's
$11
only to
and
reserve the field.
If they want to reserve it, so if they, for example, we have a 15-year-old team that wants to come out on Saturday and practice at a certain time, we only have one field that age group can play on. So they'll come in and maybe once or twice a month, someone will come in, can I reserve that field? And we let them do that. So
And that's when you charge them?
that's when we charge them. That's the
Other
only
than that,
time,
they just go-
that's the only time we charge them if someone wants to
We should charge
reserve.
them at all,
So we,
if they're from Bel Aire.
If they're from Bel Aire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Help your water bill, right?
I agree with what Betty's saying. I think if it seems like it's an infrequent
it's
type
very
thing.
infrequent.
Because what if the kids from Isley, and the majority of them go to Bel Aire, and they want to go over there and use the rec field, and all the parents, they live here in Bel Aire. We're double dipping, aren't we? Because we charge
The
them.
only thing I worry about is if we said, hey, nobody's getting charged, there could be people that would take advantage of that, where,
We have-
like I said, some of these 15-year-old teams are very competitive and they need that specific time to reserve, and they're willing to take that $11 hit to make sure they have that time. I mean,
But right now, we really haven't had a problem.
There's
having
not a
them.
problem.
So I like the idea, if
There's
you're not
not a
from Bel
problem.
Aire, you know what? We'll put your name down.
First come, first serve.
I personally like the reservation for the Bel Aire people for the reason that out-of-town teams do come and practice on those fields.
Well, can't they put in a reservation without paying?
They could.
I guess that's what I was kind of assuming
Yeah.
Betty was saying, is that you could
That's what I
still
meant.
reserve it if you're a Bel Aire resident, but you would not be
And
charged.
we do not do reservations from May until our season's over.
Right.
So we're only talking here in
Before
April.
May, we're talking March and April, and then in the fall, because that's when we're on the fields.
Well, but I want to stick with that they still have to reserve even if they're not charged a fee, because liability, we still need to get their signature on the agreement. I think that's what we'll need to make sure.
Yeah,
Jackie's
that's what I
taking
meant.
notes to make sure that the agreement, so that our liability is covered. If they're out of town, I think we should still take the reservation and their money.
And you'll see here, if I can insert that here because it goes with what you're saying, the city will invoice Sunrise for field use associated with this contract. That includes, like, if the city has to clean something up, if you were to keep the decision where you have to pay the $11 to make a reservation. So it's just a very general invoice you for any issues, that kind of thing. And if you decided tonight that it included a reservation fee, that would be included. If you decide not, it will not. So you may see that language still in there
Okay.
at the next.
We could also put a limit, Bel Aire teams and, resident-led teams or whatever can get 10 free reservations in a year, or
Nah,
leave it?
just
Okay,
leave it.
all right.
Don't charge them, but they still have to make a reservation, but they have to be a Bel Aire resident.
So how are we gonna prove that, is my
They have a
question.
driver's license, or they have a
So,
water bill
so
address.
there's one person on their team from Bel Aire and 15 from Park City.
So who
We're gonna
cares?
give it to them?
If the Bel Aire resident is the one who comes in and makes the reservation,
He's the one making the reservation.
That's my question.
yeah,
The
I think
coach or-
that way you're covered, Brian, and that takes you out of
Normally, the
having to make a
coach
bunch of
makes
tough
the
decisions.
I think as long
It's
as
not
the
the kids.
availability is there and it's not like 20 teams trying to get one field, that's when we enter into the, okay, now we gotta take a closer look at it. But I think it sounds like it's
It's
infrequent
not a
enough
problem
that we
now.
can just
Like I
handle it.
said, other than Sunrise, we get 1 or 2 requests a month to reserve the field. Other than that, people just drop in, they call me, hey, when is somebody on that field? I'll tell them, well, we've got a team practicing, Sunrise got a game, they practice till 6. That's already going on.
Okay.
I do want to move us along, but I would like to ask Sue one other thing. Is this something that maybe we could put in, this is our policy, so we don't have to come back to this every single stinking year? And then, now, but with the idea that Brian, our rec director, if in 3 years is going, holy cow, come back to the council and ask for a change. That way,
I don't think it can, because what if the other schools do it?
that's what I
I
just
mean,
said. That way he would be able
This
to
is just a
come.
special agreement with Sunrise.
Maybe we can, a suggestion, I've seen it in other contracts, okay? Something to the effect that the contract automatic renewals on its anniversary unless either party gives a 30-day notice.
Like that. Yep.
Perfect.
I like that.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about 2018 fees.
So every year staff reviews the fees, we look at what other communities are charging. Some of it's set by the fines and stuff are set by the state, and those change after legislative season, so we go through and adjust these. And I thought it was important for you all to see where our revenues come from. So when you see on our budget fees, then these are all the fees in there. So everybody kind of reviewed them, and actually it was Brian that was the one that had the fee change. So Brian, you want to talk about your proposals?
We are proposing to raise most of our fees. Some of these were raised 2 years ago minimally. The non-resident fees were raised 2 years ago minimally. Resident fees for programs have not been raised since 2012. Some of the past fees haven't been raised since about 2010. We have been working on a project since Jackie started. So how long has that been?
Never mind, go on.
And this has been a long time coming. Right now, for our volunteer program staff, we do background checks in-house through the Bel Aire Police Department. There are limitations on that, what the police department can do, what they can check, and when they can do it. Sometimes it's difficult for them to do it for us. Now, granted, there's no fee for it. It's become a burden upon the police department over the years doing this. We have been looking, and we're still looking, and our policy is near completion. We are looking at going with an outside agency. With that comes a cost. And it's hard enough to get those volunteers anyway. We don't want to make them go pay for it themselves. So we're going to have policies in place, and we're going to pay for some of our programs volunteers, and we're going to get that background check done professionally by certified agencies, and with that comes a cost. So we're going to pass that on. So we've raised fees a little bit, not much. We've also looked at what other agencies charge for similar programs, especially what our neighbor to the south on Woodlawn charges for programs, which are very similar to our programs, the local YMCA. And we have adjusted our prices, and we're still at or below what they charge for programs. So we're gonna, right now, the culture in Wichita is we've got to check our people. We got to make sure our coaches are up and up. We got to make sure that our program staff, some of our paid program staff, instructors, people that work with children and adults are the right kind of people. So we're going to go above and beyond what we've done in the past and check everybody out. So we're going to raise our fees and pass that on a few dollars.
So the plan to do these background checks involves staff, hired staff, or volunteers as well?
It's hired staff already gets that done through HR. When someone gets hired in the city of Bel Aire, Ted, who's our HR guy, you fill out a form, you give him permission, he runs it through another agency, which charges about 40 or 50 bucks a head every time, I think, something like that. The agency that we're going to bring to you does it just for parks and recreation and YMCA's and things like that, and it's $17.50 a head, flat fee. So.
And you say they're certified. Who certifies them?
Some national association of law enforcement or something like that. Everybody has a certification. But it is up and up. It's city or Derby Rec uses this agency. Wichita uses an agency. Valley Center uses an agency. Some people still don't do background checks. There are people in our community that still do not do background checks on their volunteers or their staff.
I'm not opposed to it. I just find it a little distasteful that we have to do that, but I understand what's going on in the culture with all the abuse issues, especially with kids. We gotta kind of.
We have to protect the kids.
Yeah.
We have to protect the kids
Right.
and the city.
Right.
How much did all these fees raise for the residents?
Oh, for example,
Just residents, I don't want to.
I'm going to give you, if you look under youth sports, where it says indoor and outdoor soccer, it
I
says
don't care about them.
38 for residents, 58 for non-residents.
Yeah, I'm talking about the recreation fees, residents, families.
Membership fee?
Oh, those only went up a few dollars.
How many dollars?
Let's go to resident family is $85 for a year. It was $80 for a year.
I still think that's too much.
Non-resident family, it went up about $5.
I don't care about non-residents. If they want to come out here and use the facilities, they can pay it. But I still feel that any resident family, resident seniors, now, the resident day fee, I don't have a problem with $3 because most families can afford the $3. But when you're talking about a resident family, if a husband and wife wanted to go in and use the treadmill or whatever, and they're a resident of Bel Aire, I think $85 a year is kind of steep.
In retrospect, it's $50 a month per person at a health club. So,
Brian, can you give us just a brief overflight of what do you get for that?
Basically, you can use the gym to walk or whatever, and the fitness center. It's not like the Y where you have pools and spas and climbing walls. We're not a big frilly place. So, $85 a year for a family. For the families that do get that, it's a good deal.
About how many members do we have?
Not very many, because
That's why.
we don't have the pools and the walls and the spas. We have a gym and some activity rooms and a small fitness center.
Does our
with the treadmills.
family membership include the pool during the
Does
summer?
not. It's separate.
What all is in the workout room?
treadmills, bikes, elliptical trainers, weights.
I wonder if that's something that we maybe could, as we're talking about promoting and marketing, because I mean, $85 is a heck of a deal.
It's a very good deal for a family.
That's a heck of a deal.
Is there a way also to maybe even bundle the family membership with of the pool and the rec center?
That's-
And then maybe we can get a little additional use
Possibly.
on both of them, bundle them together, a little discount because you bundled. I mean,
Yeah, use last year's fees as your bundle. And
Yeah.
Last year's fees is what it is.
Well,
The
I just hate to
pool,
see paying the
the pool's a little
residents
different
that live
deal.
here.
Because homeowner associations are involved. So,
I thought that was back to the city.
there are four homeowners associations that pay dues and fees towards the pool.
So is there a parity issue that we're trying to address there, or what's the involvement?
The homeowner associations,
Yeah, I know, they're paying a fee for use of the pool, the members of their homeowners association, right? So how is that an issue with?
it's just really not, but how do you merge them? I mean, I guess,
How you
merge the
they
rec
can't get the
center.
bundle then,
Yeah.
unless they want
I-
to
I-
pay
I-
extra. Unless they want to pay
Yeah,
extra. Unless they want to pay extra.
yeah.
I mean, if they already have access to the pool,
Are they paying the listed price for their memberships?
Who's that?
The homeowners associations, are they
They-
paying the
yes.
membership for each
Yes.
house
Yes.
as listed?
Yeah.
But we could come up with a fee for a pool and
Yeah.
family membership.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that.
You could essentially still
Discount it.
bundle, discount the rec center fee.
The pool,
With
the
equipments,
pool,
if the homeowners association.
the pool family membership is
$170.
$170. And that for a summer pool membership is about a third of what other pools are. If you look at similar kind of pools. You
So
know,
maybe
what
for
is it?
$200 you get both, I don't know.
I think it's $10 as a non-member of like the Y to just go and use the
$10
Y.
a head.
$10 a head.
$10
yeah.
a head.
So I mean, you're talking about
Yeah, that's
a
one
family
time.
of four, $40.
Yeah.
I mean, you get to go 4 times to the pool for the same price as you can go all summer long to here. So yeah, that's a value. I mean,
I like that. What do you guys think? $200 gets you gym membership and.
that's a huge discount, son.
No, 170 plus 85 would be what? You made the math, 255, so what, 225 maybe?
I like that. So 220. Yeah. I mean, something. I mean, if we could expand the use of our facilities, and
So we give them a choice too. They can buy
Yeah,
a pool
so-
membership, they can buy a rec center membership, or they
do
can
a
buy a
bundle
bundle.
together. Yeah,
Do
I mean,
do
if
what
we
Cox
can,
does.
if we can get more of our residents using,
I think
our
I-
things, and then possibly that would open up to expanding the equipment or upgrading or whatever we need to do to continue to make the best for our citizens. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Market that, so that people
And-
don't.
I didn't say,
You need signage. When you walk into the rec center, you need a nice big sign that says.
well, we're all looking at Mrs. Tristan back in back, we're all tired. There's our marketing genius back there who does a fantastic job on social media. So, not until our city council meeting when we officially approve this, but I think that would be something we could absolutely promote.
That'd be real easy to throw together.
Yeah, gym membership, and then I think we're gonna move forward with putting this bundle on here too, so.
And it'd be interesting to get some membership numbers before and then, a year from now to see the utilization.
How many people did actually?
And how did that affect the rec center's, margins?
We'd wanna make it a special, you have to sign up by such and such date.
The past revenues at both the pool and the rec center, the biggest portion comes from the day fees. At the pool and the rec center.
Right.
I would expect that to be.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of pool members that are not part of the HOA right now?
I think we had probably 50 families buy the family
Okay.
membership. But as I said, the day fees is the biggest portion of revenue.
Okay.
What is the day fee? I don't see the day fee.
$3 a day is what we're
On
proposing.
the pool?
At the pool.
No.
Under 12, this is for under 12, it says.
Well, that's, what we're wanting to do is, That's a typo.
So that's just the standard?
Just a straight daily fee is $3 a day.
Okay, what is that, what is it, what was it?
What we were doing, we were charging $2 for kids and $3 for adults before, and we said, let's just charge everybody the same.
$3, okay.
And
I mean, that is, that's
and it was
that's
the
a
same.
bargain.
It was the
That's
same
a
thing at
bargain.
the rec center. Let's just charge everybody the same.
Yeah, that's a bargain for the pool, so.
Yeah.
And swimming lessons, $40, that's per lesson?
That's per session, which is 2 weeks, 8 classes.
Okay.
What about the pool rentals? How did you guys come up with those fee recommendations, and did those change?
Pretty much how much it costs us to pay our guards and turn the lights on and chemical estimates.
And so during those times, are other people allowed to use the pool, or is it an exclusive?
Those are after-hour rentals.
After hours?
After, like,
Okay.
mostly on the weekends after the pool closes.
I mean, that's cheap.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and
Because
if
you do
it was
it
during
exclusively, yeah.
the business hours, I would think that, we'd almost lose
Yeah.
more revenue than that, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's just after hours. And it kind of depends on how many people they have, because if you have more than 25 there, it's going to take 3 guards, so it costs a little bit more.
And tell me, when
Per
does
hour.
the pool open? I know it closes awfully early, but that's because of,
Memorial weekend, it opens, and we generally close when school starts. Mainly because school starts.
Then kids don't come anymore, right?
Yeah.
All the guards are gone.
Yeah. So,
Are these pool rentals, is that used a lot?
we get quite a few pool rentals. There's generally,
a lot of birthday parties out there.
generally, every weekend, there's generally a pool rental.
I mean,
all summer.
that's cheap. I mean, if you look at, how much is renting like Jumpy Jump Land?
Couple $100.
A couple $100, and,
This is per hour, so most pool rentals will go 2 to 3 hours.
yeah, I mean, that's cheap. Under $100 for a 2-hour party for a kid.
Yeah.
20, up to 25 people, that's cheap, so.
Would you like
So you want to
raise that?
Well, I don't know that we need to raise, I mean, that would be, his recommendation more than mine. I'm just saying for value for our.
I think
that's
Jeff
might be
is saying it's a
something
good
to
deal.
Yeah,
It's a good deal.
Give them
For the value,
It's a
that's
good
a
deal.
great deal. I mean,
It's a
And
good
then
deal,
more
but-
stuff that we can use
More
to
promotion.
promote, and,
Yeah, we're paying for it.
and I hope
We're
you
paying
come
for
back next year, Brian, and say, we were booked solid nonstop, raise the fees because the demand's so high.
Yeah,
No pressure.
well, the only thing I can.
Tell everybody
I'm
watching at home, that's a
concerned
good
about
deal, rent
Yeah.
the pool.
is Raising residents and seniors. Otherwise, it's okay.
So you want us to revisit and look at bundling the memberships, and then when you see this at your meeting, that'll be on here.
Right.
As an additional option, not necessarily instead of
Right.
having
Yeah.
the individuals.
Yeah,
So a
yeah,
third
you can still
option,
get,
as a way to encourage more
That
people to take
will add
advantage.
value to both.
yeah, and then if we could see numbers and see, because like I said, if we could see increased use at the rec center because of this, or increased pool because of this, and then we can, revisit and go, wow, this really
So
became a thing.
if one of these homeowners associations come to us and say, can we do that too? I think we do that too before they are.
Yeah.
But then do we give them the same kind of, because right now they pay pretty much what our family membership, that portion of their HOA dues goes towards the pool. So, and because their HOA dues are about twice that. I think it's like $350.
I mean,
Those HOA fees don't go just for the pool, it goes for a lot of the
It
services.
goes for
So
the pool,
maybe
the
difference is-
landscaping,
Maybe the difference is, if we're saying the bundle is $225, and the pool is $170 of that, we just subtract the $170 from the $225 and give them that deal.
Yeah.
Which is
And give the same deal to the homeowners.
$55.
If it's asked, I think
If
we
they're-
probably,
yeah, I mean,
it's
I think
it's just
that's-
fair.
If the HOA wants to subscribe all the houses at the $225
Or-
rate,
There you are.
that sounds great,
Yeah.
right?
Or if the individual wants to pay the extra,
Yeah.
let them do it.
Yeah,
So it's fair.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That seems fair.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments on fees for 2018? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Final thing that we've got this evening, two different types of policies, I guess if you want to call it that, and Jackie will help me out on this too. We've just got the first one, let's see, why am I out of order here? I'm missing the workshop policy. Is the first one. Just wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts about changing, if you want to see any changes. The reason we're going to do this is we're going to bring policies just that way council can review it. Had a lot of different changes made to some of these policies. Some have remained the same for years. So, but do want to bring that to everybody. For some reason, I do not have a copy of the workshop policy, but I mean, I know it, but that's, just want to see if you guys had any other changes that normally I'll just let everybody know. Workshops are scheduled the second Tuesday of each month, but it is not mandatory that we have one. We do not have to have one.
Or on that day either, so you could change
Yeah,
it.
like we did for this one. So, but as you can tell from tonight, this is a good chance to really ask a lot of questions, before we, are up there in the meetings. So, if you guys have any changes for the, to the policy, let me know.
I don't see any changes on workshop policy.
I think we might need to clarify based on tonight the public input during workshops on that policy and kind of define what that means and think about how we can how we can include input from the public. I liked what we did
honestly,
tonight.
Yeah. And after we are done basically saying, is there anything that, any questions or from anybody sitting, I mean, because that it lets people be involved, but again, in a structured way. I mean, it's not like they can just speak up during this. I mean, I think it worked well.
And I think
after we finish discussing an item.
Yeah, just like today when
after we're done
discussing the item. Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you, and I'm not sure what I can't tell you the last time we've ever had anybody attend a workshop.
Well, and maybe if people are able to ask questions like that, maybe we'll get better attendance, and I think that'd be great.
My other thing is, and I do want to say that a lot of times when we're asked questions or you get citizens' concerns input, kind of as a general rule, it's usually not a good idea to respond or answer the questions right then and there because sometimes something we haven't really been rehearsed.
Well, it depends on the
research, and we want to make sure we're prepared because if we say anything, answer a question up here in a public meeting, they can then take that. Help me out here, Jack. You know what I'm trying to say that.
They can take it.
Well, they can't take it as policy because we're not making.
But they will if it's. But council member or the mayor said in this workshop, even though, and then find out afterwards. Oh crud, that's not something we can do, or we do it. That's why we really. I mean, there's reasons why we don't encourage that in this setting, and there's reasons why when I ask people if anybody has any citizens' concerns, which I ask at every meeting, whether there's someone in the audience or not. Generally, it's a real good rule at the end. Thank you so much for your comment. That's something we're going to look into, something we will consider. Appreciate you bringing that to the council and then moving on. That gives us time to, before we really get off track, get off an agenda item, we're talking about something that maybe only one of us is prepared to talk on.
Well, couldn't that be used at the same thing as at the workshop? I mean, say the same thing that we would, whatever you said, get back with you.
You can. I think that what you're deciding between, looks like these, I didn't write these, but I think they're solid. Looks like your workshops are for your governing body to gather information and to bring out issues and to really sort through how you want to proceed to the next step. These were written to kind of make sure that's focused on that. So you control whether or not you do take public input. You kind of leave that to the mayor's discretion. If you have a 2-hour meeting on something and you have several experts here to talk to you about it, you want to gather that information and then in future invite the public to come in and comment and to take your feedback on the record, kind of is what you're concerned about.
So right now, it's written to give you the discretion to decide that. What sounds like what you're considering is possibly making that a standard part of any workshop, which now you've gone from taking in information, having an expert, to also making time for public comment. And that's just the two kind of things you're gonna have to consider.
I mean, is that something you guys want?
Well, I think they should be able to, like whoever said it over there, be able to come to the workshop and express their opinion, because that's how you get feedback. Because if they say, oh, well, Mabel came and said so-and-so, well, at the next workshop, Walter may come and say his opinion on whatever we're talking about. But I don't think you necessarily need to say, or possibly well, yeah, we'll do that. Because you can't make a decision at a workshop.
Well,
But you just said, well, thank you for coming, we consider your input, and as the council or the mayor, I don't know, how would that be put? We'll get back with you, or we'll discuss it.
One of the concerns I have with that, and it's also a concern at city council meetings, and I understand reasons for the rules and procedures, so don't think I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I think that the transparency and the interaction is important with the citizens. And when a citizen comes and expresses a concern or an issue, I think it's appropriate for us to understand what that is. Sometimes that requires follow-up questions to that citizen. They can't just make a statement and say, oh yeah, I got it all, and I know exactly what you mean. I may or may not understand it, and I may need to ask a follow-up question just to understand it. Now, I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, what you said about making a decision and say, oh yeah, we'll do that. No, we can't do that, because that's what you do at council. That's when we make those decisions. But I do think it's appropriate and necessary for transparency that we have the opportunity to have that interaction with citizens for clarification of what they're in.
Oh, absolutely. You can. I wasn't trying to say don't ask questions, just don't respond at all. I was saying
think through your
think through. We want that we're protected. Let me pick on Councilman Rojas for tonight, just because of I'm doing that because tonight. No, this is a real good example. And he didn't say anything that was wrong. He didn't say anything that's going to get him in trouble. But when the gentleman asked the question about Woodlawn, you opine that, well, probably what they'll do is they'll close one lane and then open up. Anybody in here, if I were a betting man, that's probably what's going to happen. But what happens if that doesn't? And that gentleman, wait a minute, I remembered a workshop a year ago, a council member told me that's what was going to happen. I'm just saying that's...
they could fly in some helicopters and pick them up for everything. I don't know.
I'm using that as an example.
I understand
not just as a reason. I'm just saying that because that was germane to tonight.
I mean, there's got to be a way to get in and out.
Yeah. Like I said, I think what you said is probably something all of us absolutely would have said, absolutely agree with, absolutely think will happen. But, I'm trying to think if you would have said, if you would have said, we'll bring in helicopters. Then...
I wasn't going to say that.
I know you were. I'm not saying... Okay. Losing all this. I just want to make sure we have protections in place for us. If we're going to open it up to citizens being encouraged to make comments at a workshop...
But I think it should be left up to you to ask the council, to ask the audience, is there anybody that would like to speak? And if so, go to the podium so everybody can hear what you're saying.
Right. And he needs to make a decision.
I agree. And you know what? That is exactly what the policy says. Mm-hmm. The way I'm hearing all of you speak, I think the policy is exactly that. That is, the mayor will recognize a citizen. They can have 3 minutes. And just let the mayor be the interactive. Yeah, workshop policy on the back. There's a public input.
Well, let me ask, we can leave it as is, or it sounds like maybe what I was hearing, do you want to put and I want it at the very beginning of the workshop, we can invite, if there's anyone in the audience who wants to speak to anything on the agenda, they can come up and do it at the very beginning of the workshop, or...
I don't think
I
so.
Or just leave it as is?
Because as demonstrated tonight, people wanted to hear what we had to say before, and hear the information before they asked questions. And in some cases, we addressed their questions just through that discussion.
Okay. So maybe that's something just at the beginning, that be aware of who's in the audience and what.
Maybe we can specify that to say that we'll recognize input or questions to a topic after it's been.
Yeah. It has to be an agenda.
After the mayor determines that it's appropriate time to ask for that input. Yes.
Yeah, but
And you
it
may have
should be after like Justin said, it should be after the item that we've discussed.
Okay.
And you should ask it after every.
So again, we're gonna leave it that it's not
Discussion.
generally something, we're not gonna have it as a standing thing at all workshops, but when we have a room full.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Probably never have anybody here till.
I was gonna say, I don't know why.
So are we okay with the way it reads then? or
Yeah.
did you
Sounds
want-
like it. Well, except for they wanted to add after the topic is
yeah, so-
discussed thoroughly, or after,
Well,
after
after
discussion
after the mayor
concludes.
says, okay,
Yeah.
we've concluded our discussion now, if the audience has.
So after each item, the mayor will consider asking that.
Bingo, that's exactly what, so I can say, hey,
Okay.
is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak to that? If not, we're gonna move on to, perfect, okay.
Move on.
Let's talk about the council rules of order. We, 99% of city councils and meetings run on Robert's rules. And then we decided a couple years ago to change to Bob's rules. That's what they do in Newton. Yeah, so.
And I think the only reason is there's like, how many books of Robert's Rules?
Yeah.
17 or 20 or 130?
Yeah, I wasn't saying say this is right or wrong, I was saying that's what happened, and.
What is that?
Vacuum cleaner.
Oh.
So,
See, I guess our question is, are you comfortable following these rules of order, or would you rather use Robert's Rules of Order? It's just
What are the
however.
major differences between the two?
So the major differences is that Robert's Rules is more technical, and so there are 4 types of motions that you can make in Robert's Rules of Order. You can make a main motion, subsidiary motion, privilege motion, and incidental motions. So we'd want you to kind of be able to identify what type of motion you're making. Their procedural order to when something substantive is on the table, there is a priority list, a specific priority list given to what's taken up, just kind of generally speaking. I can see that the reason, why previous council went with this Bob's Rules of Order is because it's all right here, it's simple, and it does revert to Robert's Rules of Order. So where something isn't identified in this format, like, how do you make a motion? You make a motion. You literally make the motion, and it's informal, it's a little more flexible, and when this fails to address something, we revert to Robert's Rules of Order, and you rely on your parliamentarian to kind of break those ties in the meantime. So that's the main difference. It is more simple. It's a bit more obscure. I mean, but it's your meeting, so I think that you own the meeting, you decide how you run it. Robert's Rules are going to be much more formal, a bit more technical, and you'll have kind of be in sync with a lot of other organizations across the country. I found out today that Kansas League of Municipalities does kind of recommend a modified version, and that seems like something like Bob's Rules, something less complex, because they do say that it's too technical.
Can we use Jeff's rules?
Statute doesn't require.
You have to be in the.
you already have 2 Jeffs on this council.
Sounds good to me.
Majority rule.
Yeah, you're really good. But
Yeah.
statute doesn't specify that
Yeah.
you have to use one rule or another. It just says that meetings need to be conducted in an orderly fashion.
And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, when we change, oh my gosh, we spent time talking about this. I haven't noticed 1 second of a difference in a meeting.
Right.
I don't know that it's affected it 1 bit, like I said, so that's why I just want to see if it's one, you guys want to just keep it as is with Bob's Rules. If you want to go back to Robert's Rules, Robert's Rules gets more technical, but a lot more people know Robert's rules as opposed to Bob's rules.
I'm good for simple.
I'm good for simple too.
Me too.
All right.
Unless, is there any reason or any example of some situation that's some great controversy that happened because of the lack of specificity?
Well, and that doesn't really rely on your meeting rules of order. Specificity is going to come down to, is the motion clear, and could it be turned into some understandable action, right? And so if you can tell what council wanted to do and what needs to be done from it, it's going to hold up in court. But I think the rules of order come in when there's a hot topic issue and you have a full house and someone else wants to say something. And so your rules of order are going to say whether or not someone can call the question and end the discussion and cause the mayor to vote, or whether the mayor's going to control that, or someone else can come in and say, I'd like this to go a certain way. So the procedure can be effective can affect how open your debate is and how open your discussion is. My recommendation was with this one, it does revert to Robert's rules. I think it's very informal. It does allow for a lot of open discussion, and it does leave a lot to the mayor to kind of decide whether to keep things going or not. Robert's rules, you do that as well, but there's some formal motions that have to happen in a certain order in order to curtail discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to ideas of reverting back, but I don't see a reason to revert back. I'm okay with the way it is. It seems to be a good way to do things.
Yeah, if somebody can tell me if there's an advantage or if there's a logical reason to go back to Robert's rules, I mean, I'd be all for hearing it, and I'd love to hear it. That's why I don't know the big differences between the two, and so, I mean,
Well, maybe before the next council meeting, you can give them all have we ever passed out that Bob's rules of order, the actual policy or whatever?
Well, this is what it
is.
You mean the formal Robert's rules? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
You mean the formal Robert's rules?
Yeah.
No, that's
a book.
330 books.
Right, exactly.
Or whatever.
This is it.
This is Bob's rules.
Yeah, we just didn't call it, we call it.
Yeah, no, I thought maybe Betty was asking for the other one.
Oh, Jackie, let me ask you, in your professional opinion, is there anything on here that we should amend or change? Because,
Okay, no. Since you're asking me now, I can just tell you.
Yes.
No, I think this is for the way you all like to meet and the way you like to consider things. This is informal enough to let you meet without letting a procedural error tie up discussion or tie up a motion. Because with Robert's rules, some things, if you don't make the proper procedural motion, you can say that vote wasn't called in time, it wasn't proper, and you can use it to really have a debate that really you're not talking about the substance of things. You're using procedural tactics to overcome a substantive issue.
so you're being like in Washington DC.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Really. So this actually gives you, from what I noticed about how you all like to meet, it actually gives you flexibility to say, yeah, in spite of all that discussion, in spite of this, we can proceed.
and it does still allow point of order, does still allow call the question.
Yeah, it does. It has all those. And when something fails and the meeting needs to be managed or moved on or controlled is the best word I can think of, or managed in some way, everything reverts to Robert's rules. So that allows everything to stay in order.
Okay.
Do we need to make any revisions on item 8 on when the mayor can vote? I know we had a discussion about that, and there was some discrepancies between our policies. And
This one's actually right.
This is the right copy? Okay. I couldn't remember which one was off. I knew one of them was.
Right.
So.
That's a good catch. This one is more inclusive.
That's why I get excited when I get to make motion in land bank meetings.
Oh, I can make a motion.
Yeah. All right, final policy is the senior funding policy. How do I explain this real in Reader's Digest versions, and we're all exhausted up here. There's 2 senior groups here in Bel Aire. There will always be 2 senior groups in Bel Aire. I tried before there will always be two senior groups for different reasons. We have two senior groups. Both senior groups are extremely happy with how things are running right now, including their funding. So I was going to see that this was brought up because it was nice. These last one was this in 2014. It was very, very nice in 2015, 16, 17 to not spend an hour talking about $5,000 for senior funding, which happened every year prior to that come budget time, because you had both sides, and both sides did not want the other one to get.
Never mind, Mayor.
So it works. Here's what we have. Senior Club gets $2,500 for their activities. They're extremely happy with that allotment. I talked with them even this evening. Senior Center, most of their budget comes from the county. That includes the staff that oversees that. Senior Club, we let them meet at the rec center without rent. Senior Center meets here in the library. And there's more and more, but this seems to be working.
Are there any requested changes from either of the senior groups?
I think what brought this up, Mayor, was last year in the budget, we raised it from $2,500 to $4,000 for the senior club.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't give them the $4,000 because of that policy or an agreement that was written.
Which is this.
Until we changed that amount from $2,500 to $4,000. The other $1,500 is in that budget. Now, the senior club meets at the rec center, and there's like 35 members, but they're active. Out of this money, they used to have garage sales and etc. But they're getting to the age, as well as I am, they can't do garage sales anymore. It's too hot when they have them, and they've probably depleted their homes given their stuff for the garage sales. And they don't spend the money foolishly. I think at Christmas time is the only time that they spend any of the money for their banquet. And like they've been going on a lot of trips with WSU, through WSU, and this next trip in May is to different places in Kansas, and it's $119, but each senior person is spending $50 of their own money. Then the treasurer is taking out the rest of that money to make up the $119. They have a lot of educational programs that go to the rec center. They have a dinner once a month, and they usually, 4th of July, I think they cater the meat. But they spend the money that the city gives them wisely, and it's only, I don't know, last year, when I brought this up of raising it, the $1,500, everybody said, well, sure, we'll give them that. But we can't give them the $4,000 until you change the policy.
And I'll say I don't see really any reason to change the policy, because the senior club, when I talk to them, they don't want more. They're perfectly happy with the 25. I talked with Carolyn Smith as recently as this evening.
Okay.
She said no one on the senior club's asking for more.
Well, Marvin Kessler did, Marlene Otto did. That's why I brought it up to put it on the workshop, and I don't know.
Is there any harm in, do we want to change it to up to? Then that way if they want to request it, but as far as I know, I subscribe to the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing.
Well, I just think they need the $4,000 so that they can do more activities, and because they've been paying for their speakers and their health people out of, like, they charge themselves dues, $5 a year. And
Yeah, I don't even think they've spent the $2,500 the last.
Yes, they did. It was over.
Did they?
Let's see, I'll have to look in your packet here, there was in January, it was their annual report for that, so
Yeah.
go back and look at that and see what they spent.
Yeah, they spent it all, and in fact, they took 1,000 and some, or I think it was 1,000 something out of their own money to make up the difference to other things that they did.
Well, why don't we ask the senior club president officially what their, because if we have it in there to budget at 4,000, our policy says 2,500. Why don't we ask them officially and see, is that a phone call you can make between now and our next meeting?
Yep.
Or we ask them to come up here if they want, but.
Okay. Yeah, the only reason that we, our auditors, when we spend money, require that we have a paper trail.
Right.
So we did send them the 2,500, but if you want to send them more, then we just have to update that. That's why it was on your agenda for tonight.
I mean, I like that. If we send them the $2,500, we can change our policy to say up to 4,000. If they so need it, they can come and request it or however. But I mean, before we just go changing things, I'd like to hear from them. I appreciate Betty bringing it up, but because I got a complete opposite report when I talked to them, and I want them to be happy and I want them to have what they need. So I would like to ask our city manager to have an official conversation with the senior club president before we take a definite
They
number.
should talk to the board, because I did not really know that she felt that way. Because I know Joyce Tammany, Norma McCune, Marvin Kessler, and Marlene Otto, they were all asking me why they didn't get the 4,000, because they watched the council meetings and the workshops. I said, I don't know, I'll ask. So I asked Ty, and that's just what he said. This had to be changed to 4,000 before they could get the other 1,500.
Is everybody okay with us changing it to say up to 4,000? That way we're not tying ourselves in. Is that okay?
Is this
that
gonna
what
break
we?
the budget?
No, because it
No.
was budgeted for 4,000.
Yeah.
For
I'm
4,000.
cool with it.
Okay.
Yeah, should we still have a conversation with the senior
Absolutely,
club?
I think we should, yeah.
That way, if they're not asking for the full 4,000, then maybe we don't send them the full amount unless they actually need it, or maybe just work with them to figure out what they really need.
That's why I'd like to say up to 4,000, because if 2,500 is all that they may not want, because like I said, we do require a paper trail for it. So.
And if that $1,500 can, be pulled, if they don't use that and it can go to the roads and patch another pothole, then
It's in the senior line.
So
everyone will appreciate that. So
It's in the senior line, you can't move it.
now we'll go ahead and check with them and see if that is something they really do want. And if they do and can spend it and say it, well.
Ain't gonna work.
But. All right, anything else?
I'd like to just kind of bring up the, as Mr. Penner and Mr. Jones actually said earlier that, 254 is a major deal for economic development. I know I've talked to Ty, and I think I've said, I know Mr. Austin said it in the last meeting, and I've talked to everybody kind of about, my passion for getting 254 fixed. My son had to go to the funeral of a classmate because somebody died on the highway. I mean, a girl that's a junior from Circle High School. And statistics show the highway is one of the most dangerous roads in the state. I mean, it is fundamentally flawed the way traffic crosses a 70-mile-per-hour highway. I've spoken with Mr. Lasher about going to the other cities along the corridor and to put pressure onto the state to fix it. I mean, I know it's not like it's going to be an overnight fix, but like I said, I mean, this is kind of where I revert to you about kind of the progress we've made or what we need to do in the future, what I need to do if I need to go speak in front of Topeka. I mean, I'll challenge the lawmakers. If they want to say no, I'll challenge the lawmakers to the next time somebody dies on that highway, they're the ones that need to go speak with the family and tell them why they weren't getting it fixed. I mean,
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's
You gotta pay extra attention on that road.
I think it's also, and I've had just a passing conversation with Chuck Weber, who's our district representative from this side of Woodlawn. The other side has the one. But, and I think we need to get him and to get other state legislators involved in that discussion as well. Because they definitely need to champion that. And right now, I know he's not on board to champion it, but, I think we can have that conversation.
like I said, and that's why I spoke to Mr. Lashley. I mean, we need to get everybody from El Dorado to Wichita, including Andover and Augusta. And if we can get everybody putting pressure, that's the only way, because if we just went to them, they'd be like, yeah, we'll get to it.
No, you're right.
But
It's a great idea.
I mean, when you have the biggest metropolitan area in the state of Kansas.
I mean, that's something one of those things are certainly a study and it can show, well, hey, if you close one access or if you, I don't know.
Yeah, I've reached out to all the cities that are along K254, because Keachai and us have already, because we're so close, have actually talked about the issues there. And I've heard back from everybody but Wichita and Sedgwick County, but everybody else is on board. They want to meet and talk about it. And I've reached out to Andover and Augusta. Augusta said they're not as close, but they'll keep an open mind and they may attend some meetings. And I haven't heard back from Andover yet, but he was going to visit with the mayor and council members there. So we have Butler County's in, Towanda, Benton, El Dorado, they're all in. So, and K96 has got their own corridor group. And it's been pretty successful. I think they've got 50 members or so over there, not just communities, but businesses and organizations, schools, stuff like that. So they have a lady that they contract with that kind of organizes meetings and stuff. And so I thought maybe our first meeting would be to have her come over and talk about how they got started and bylaws and, just give us a history of how they came about, and then to kind of talk about us doing the same thing on 254. So we'll be putting something together here in the next few weeks about getting us all at a meeting and see if we can get that put together. Because I think a united voice of all of us along 254 is going to be easier than just you or myself or, Keachai going to talk to somebody.
Great idea.
All right, anything else? Let's get out of here.
Okay.
Make a motion?
No. It's done.